Good evening and welcome to the Board of Selectmen for July 24th. The first item on the agenda is the public meeting with the Board of Health. I'd like to invite up the members of the Board of Health. Hello.
Michael Blanchard, Health Director. I just want to introduce our Chairperson, Roxanne Musto.
Hi, Roxanne.
Our Board Member, Ann Fiddler.
Hi, Ann.
It's good to see you.
Okay.
So I understand you have a vacancy and you're looking to
Fill it.
fill it.
Yes, we had a resignation from one of the members that moved, and we had a meeting on June 24th, the Board of Health did, and we have come up with a recommendation for a nominee for that, and her name is Laura Richards, very qualified. We've submitted her resume, I believe you must have a copy of that as well.
When we were discussing what type of person we were looking for to fill the vacancy, we thought, well, it would be really nice to have somebody with a background in public health. We also realized that the person leaving filled a really important niche for us in that he was a lawyer and thought like a lawyer and understood the issues related to the law. And wouldn't it be nice if we found somebody who was both? And we did. Laura Richards is a person who I have worked with wearing my hat over at Boston University in the School of Public Health. And she has done a lot of work over the years in tobacco control, more recently with regionalization projects going across the Commonwealth. But she's worked closely with and works for the Mass Association of Health Boards. So we think and she's a resident and she's got kids here and she really cares. And
How long is this term for?
It's one more year, right?
1 more year.
Yeah, he left, Tim had to leave after the second year, so it would be one more year, and then there would be an
He moved his
election.
family to another town.
Right, right.
Sounds like a perfect candidate.
Sounds like she has good experience, and she's a neighbor of mine, so I'm happy to support her.
Okay, good. So we have a
Don't
motion.
say anything bad about her, she's sitting in the back of the room.
Hi, Laura.
On the
Wanna come
off
up?
chance that we voted her in, she was going to attend our meeting tonight.
Wanna come up
Is
and
this a joint vote, or Anne Marie, or?
Has to be a joint
Okay.
vote.
Okay. You want to read the motion since she's a neighbor, Katie? or-
Sure.
Do we have to read the motion twice, or we just, the Board of Health has to vote, and
Yeah.
then we,
Okay.
Okay, so I'll move that we approve the appointment of Laura T. Richards to the Board of Health to fill a vacancy created by the out-of-town relocation of Board Member Timothy J. Lowney to serve through the next town election.
Second the motion?
the motion has been made and seconded. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye?
Aye. Do we need to do a roll call vote?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So we have to take a roll call vote of you, of this committee, and they take.
And they take their own vote, okay. So, Ms. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen, yes.
Okay, so I guess we'll make a motion, the Board of Health makes a motion to approve Laura T. Richards to the vacant position for the Board of Health for the one-year term.
I would second it.
All those in favor? Aye. Roll call,
Okay.
okay, so, yes.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Congratulations, Laura.
Congratulations, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Number 3 on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes for July 10th, 2013.
Move to approve the minutes of July 10th, 2013.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. And the future meeting dates is August 14th and 21st. Are we still good with that?
Yes.
Those work, yes.
Okay, so they're good for me as well. Number 5 is the citizen speak. Anyone here for citizen speak? Okay. Come on up. When you come up, introduce yourself.
Good evening, Tim Kernan, 642 Brush Hill Road.
Hi, Tim.
And just before I start, I will pass this on to the chair, and then I'll have a copy of that and that for everybody else. Thank you. As this board may not be familiar with my earlier involvement in the Yulin Rink affair in 2010, during the year I and several others argued for the town's acquisition of the lease from DCR for the management of the rink to be by a community-based nonprofit to manage the rink on behalf of the town. I'd like to draw to the board's attention 2 points which were relevant then and relevant now. The primary reason the town sought the lease from DCR was to protect the ice times for both public skating and youth hockey, including the high school hockey and the Milton youth hockey teams. The DCR stipulated in their lease to the town that public skating hours were to adhere to a specific schedule of availability. During the tenure of the prior management entity, public skating hours have been reduced and or moved to less accessible times. Saturday public skating has been eliminated, and Sunday times are on an irregular schedule. I've attached or given you a copy of DCR specifications for the allotted times of public skating and a petition signed by 100+ persons at an earlier time this spring requesting the DCR to enforce their original requirement. And the second point I wanted to make was that the RFP issued in 2010 called for the creation of an oversight committee. This committee has never been created, and as a result, the public was never given a complete financial accounting over the past few years. You will recall that at the time the DCR let the lease, their accounting data was spotty at best, making it difficult to understand the costs and revenues of the operation. Making these numbers available or visible to the public will go a long way in helping to understand how the rink needs to be managed. There are other DCR rinks nearby which are making money, and the Ullin is a superior facility and should be profitable. And B, the public has never given a voice in the public skating and other programs, witness the reduction in public skating times. I urge the selectmen to work to ensure that the interests of the youth of this town are preserved. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for citizen speak? Come on up, Sharon. Oh, actually, if there's, is there more for the airplane traffic just beside yourself, Sharon? Just you? Okay, come on up.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Flightman, and I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 1, and I'm the co-chair of MCAAI, which is the Milton Citizens Against Aviation Impact. I'm speaking for my committee and all the people who couldn't make it tonight and the dozens of residents who have contacted us. We are encouraging the town to make and support an appeal on runway 33L. We are prepared with the foundation of a case, and we would work with town council should the town decide to appeal the record of decision. If the town decides not to take legal action, we respectfully request that the town would fund the $450 filing fee so that our committee could move forward with our own action. The objectives that we have as a committee are force the redo of the study because they did not use the correct population data, employ more meaningful alternatives to the noise measures that they used in the study, to identify and to thoughtfully consider other alternatives that do not impose unreasonable costs on the town of Milton, with 3 existing RNAV corridors and departures flying over our town, and to impose a requirement on the FAA to truly engage the public in 3 local evening public meetings regarding 33L RNAV before imposing unreasonable costs on us. The selectmen must act for the protection and benefit of the entire town. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Cheryl. Anyone else, Steve? Oh, we'll stick with the airline traffic just for a minute. This is Philip.
I'm Phil Johanning, 23 Parkwood Drive, Milton. The only thing I wanted to add to what Cheryl said is that the time frame is extremely short. The appeal must be filed by next Friday. So, you know, there's almost an unrealistic amount of time left to prepare a case and to do something about it. So, you know, I think the need to work together, if you decide to go forward with an appeal, is really critical. Because we've been down this road, we have been going over the issues for quite some time. I just urge you to appeal the record of decision, and I urge you to work with us, and we'll be as helpful as we can be. Thanks.
Thank you, Philip. Anyone else with citizen speak on the airplane? Okay, Steve, come on up. Okay, we'll bring him up after.
Chairman, please. Thank you, Paula. Good evening, Steve Morash, 47 Standish Road, and a town meeting member from Precinct 2. Mr. Chairman, I've given you a signed petition for a citizens article for town fall meeting. This article seeks authorization for the town moderator to appoint a town government study committee consisting of 7 members for the purpose of studying the form and organization of the town of Milton government and providing recommendations, if any, for changes in the present form and/or organization of the town of Milton to town meeting no later than 2014 annual town meeting. This may seem a little bit redundant, and as we all know, there is a committee that was formed by the Board of Selectmen, I believe, 2 years ago, that presented their recommendations at town meeting in the spring of 2013. We feel that some of those recommendations, especially for the way they affect town meeting, that any changes to town meeting should come from a committee. The undersigned folks would like to have this back at town meeting so that town meeting can have a committee of town meeting members that would vote on what town meeting should look like and what town government should look like. This article was defeated 2 years ago, I believe, but we think the undersigned folks on this article would like to reopen that for a discussion at town meeting. So that's the purpose of this.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
Steve, if there are any changes to town meeting, or for that matter, almost anything else that's a change to the form of government, it would have to go through, even from the committee that we established, it would have to go through town meeting. We can't change the form of town meeting without a change in our bylaws.
I totally appreciate and understand that. But I think the folks that we talked to after town meeting, and we thought long and hard about whether we should have this article resubmitted before the work of the Board of Selectmen's committee was, I guess not finished is the right word, because they are still meeting, but before they presented their initial report, which Rick Neely did at this town meeting. We wanted to hear what that report looked like and what it said. We did, and we think there are an awful lot of opportunities that were missed, and that is the purpose of what this committee might be looking at. But again, and I have, as I said at town meeting in the spring, we appreciate the work they've done. They worked really hard. I believe Rick said they had 25 meetings, not to be taken lightly, but I think there were some missed opportunities. And we have no problems with anyone that was on that committee, given the history of what their commitment was to this town. We just strongly feel that town meeting should have more of an input into looking at how town meeting is studied, and town government is studied, and that's the purpose of this article. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone else for a citizen speak? Come right up. Hello.
Hi, my name is Martha Goldsmith. I live at 321 Fairmount Avenue in Milton. I have lived there for more than 20 years and was just here in support of any litigation strategy or any steps the town might take to appeal the Runway 33L decision. Certainly as a longtime resident of Milton, I have noticed a significant change in the airplane traffic and the noise that we are subjected to, and feel that the report by the FAA didn't accurately reflect the impact within the flight pattern.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else, citizen speak? Okay. So the next item is actually a discussion on Runway 33L. And before we get into that discussion, we have to go into executive session to discuss it with our town council. So we have a motion. So we're going to have to ask everybody to leave for about 10 minutes, okay, out into the hallway after we make this motion. So I make a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy with respect to litigation concerning the town's appeal of the Runway 33L decision, believing that having this discussion in open session would have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the body, and to return to open session.
Second.
Ms. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen, yes. We are in executive session. Okay, we're back in open session again, and thank you for your patience. The next item on the agenda is a discussion on Runway 33L, and at this time I'd like to welcome up our Town Council, John Flynn, and our alternate CAC representative, David Godine, to the table. Come on up. David?
Oh, you want me? You want to? He was going to talk for me. Hey, Chairman, what do you want me to do?
You want to sit down here?
No, I want to stand up here.
Okay.
So first of all, I'd like to welcome you to as the alternate on the CAC board. We're grateful after Judy Kennedy announced that she's going to be resigning. John, do you want to give us a brief update on where we are with the Runway 33L?
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Just for the public, I'm John Flynn. I'm a partner with Murphy Hesse, Toomey Lehane and Quincy, Town Council for the town of Milton. We were asked to look at the procedure to appeal the EA issued by the FAA in this matter, and if possible, to discuss the feasibility of the likelihood of success of such an appeal. If the town were to appeal, the deadline is August 3rd. I agree with the previous speaker that an appeal should be filed Friday, August 2nd to avoid, technically speaking, you could file it by that Monday, but our feeling is it's better to get it in early rather than risk a late. There are two possible places to file the appeal: the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, or the United States Court of Appeals for the First Circuit. If an appeal were to be filed, it really should be in the local circuit, in our opinion. The previous speaker is correct that the filing fee is $455. The issue on appeal would be, were the findings of the FAA supported by substantial evidence? And an alternate way of saying that, as courts have said, a decision like this would be overturned if it were arbitrary and capricious. These are difficult cases from the research we've done. One reason they're difficult is it's an appeal from a federal agency, and our reading of the decisions is the courts extend substantial deference to decisions of federal agencies like the FAA. In fact, since 2001, we could find that there have been 3 appeals in this circuit from environmental assessments issued by the FAA, none of which have been successful. In the United States as a whole, other than in this circuit, there have been 5 appeals from environmental assessments issued by the FAA, none of which are successful. The decisions indicate that the courts do give substantial deference to findings of the FAA, as I mentioned. 3 of the issues in this case would be, one, the first one, were the findings of the FAA supported by substantial evidence? And what would have to be overcome here is, in essence, the FAA has found that the noise levels for planes that take off on runway 33L and fly over Milton are at the lower end of the spectrum. And by the lower end of the spectrum, I mean that they measure sound by what's called a day-night average sound level. And the FAA data indicates that when planes reach Milton taking off from 33L, the noise levels are from 45 to 60 DNL, average day-night level, and that's considered low by the FAA, so you'd have to overcome those findings. The data also indicates that when planes which take off from 33L are flying over Milton on a departure, they're at an average elevation of 6,000 to 10,000 feet. So you'd have to overcome that data too, because that seems to be their way of supporting the fact that these are why the readings are lower in Milton and some of the communities at this level of the arc than, say, some of the Boston communities. The second issue that has been raised is that the FAA used an improper population count, if you will, in doing their readings, and in so doing, they excluded about 6% of the Milton population, primarily group blocks such as schools, religious houses where religious live, group homes for treatment, those kinds of things. I think the challenge there would be that in Milton, those types of group homes, if you will, those group settings that are excluded, aren't discretely located. They tend to be in thickly settled areas. So I think it would be difficult to prove that that is a fatal flaw, that, you know, the likelihood is the finding would be, well, okay, they were excluded, but there was enough of a representative sample of the population to make that valid. The third issue that we understood was raised is that the FAA didn't give sufficient consideration to all of the comments raised, and that the challenge there would be that as we read the regs, the FAA is not required to respond to every individual comment. It's required to make a reasonable response to the public comments, and the issue there would be, is the voluminous record enough of a reasonable response? It is a review of the record. It is not a trial in the sense that you get to start anew. Your appeal would have to be based upon the existing record, all of the comments that were submitted, all of the, any document, any whatever, chart, graph, memo, letter that's in the record. So it's not a starting over, if you will. In my opinion, in order to properly pursue an appeal, I should say that in a previous meeting, a speaker represented to you that the appeal could be done by a single document. That's correct. It's a petition review. It's a standard form in the regs of the regulations of the Court of Appeals. But in order to properly prosecute an appeal, in my opinion, you need to hire a consultant who's an expert in this field to help dissect the evidence. Again, there would be no trial with witnesses, but an expert would be essential to help evaluate the validity and the sufficiency of the evidence that's on the record. That would be a very expensive undertaking, in my opinion. It'd be analogous to some of the cases we've had where you have a review of a Conservation Commission decision, or where you have a review of the record, and I think it would be an expensive proposition. Frankly, in my opinion, it would be difficult. I think it's not likely it will be successful. Obviously, we would give it our best, but to be candid, I think it would be a difficult hurdle to overcome. Our review of the record indicates that the real problem here with the noise level we've seen, even though this case involved runway 33L, in all the charts we've looked at, the real problem, the clearer problem, is what the noise levels over Milton from the approaching paths. Two of the runways mentioned, at least in some of the correspondence, of 4R and 4L, for two reasons. The noise levels are higher, and the planes are at a lower elevation when they're coming over Milton. So, Mr. Chairman and member of the boards, I guess, in summary, I would say that, in my opinion and the opinion of the attorneys who reviewed this with me, it would be a difficult case to prove, not likely to succeed on the merits, and probably substantial expense to the town, because, again, not only would we recommend that you have the legal work, but we would recommend you have a consultant expert. So I think it would be an expensive case with difficult likelihood of success.
Would you recommend, John, that based on what you told us, that we should concentrate our efforts on runway 4L and 4 right and 4 right versus 33L.
Yes.
Can I just make a?
Yeah.
And the more I've listened to everything, we're in executive session, and I think David Godin is going to speak a little bit, but I think he's convinced me that there is a problem in Milton, and I think we all know there's a problem in Milton. It doesn't affect everybody in Milton, but it affects enough people in Milton that it's an issue. David has indicated that almost 50% of the aircraft that either come in or go out of Logan comes over Milton. I mean, that's an undue burden, and I agree, it is. And David also said that in terms of runway 33, at this point, approximately 6% of the flights, departing flights, use runway 33L, and of that, only 2% of those wind up actually going over Milton because they take other paths. So, you know, we're questioning whether spending all our money fighting 33L as opposed to spending all our money fighting a bigger issue of total airplane noise over Milton makes more sense. And in my mind, that battle makes more sense, and I think we're ready to go ahead with that in terms of trying to find, first, a non-legal approach dealing with both our congressional delegates and our state senator and representatives to try and bring some influence to bear on FAA to say that what you're doing to Milton is not fair. There should be some kind of relief that Milton should be able to get. We shouldn't be getting 50% of the air traffic coming over the town, and there are ways to mitigate it. And in doing that, I think we probably would need the help of some kind of an expert, be that a volunteer or a paid expert. But I think that's the approach we should take.
Did you have any comment?
No, I agree with what Tom said. It's a serious problem depending on where you live in town. We've heard from some people it's not a problem, but for a lot of people this is interrupting their lives and causing causing disturbances and causing a lot of different problems. We did have the town administrator, and Anne Marie could probably report on this, we did ask the town administrator to contact some of the other towns that are under the flight path of the 33L departures. And there was little interest. Anne Marie, maybe you could give us a report on that. There was little interest in joining us in an appeal.
I spoke with Belmont, who said they had no issue at all in Belmont. I spoke with the town administrator. I spoke with City Warren's office in Newton, who also said the same thing, that Newton had very few complaints and no real noise problems in their community. I spoke with Dedham. Same thing, they had very few. Am I not on? No. Oh, my 15 minutes of fame.
Now you're on.
Thank you. I spoke with Canton, the same thing. I spoke with the town administrator, Bill Friel in Canton. Very, very few complaints. I did speak with the town administrator, David Murphy in Randolph, who said that they were impacted a little bit with airplane noise, but not to the extent where they would be willing to join in the expense of an appeal on runway 33L. I did, because of the article that was in the Patriot Ledger yesterday on the town of Hull, I did reach out to the town administrator in the town of Hull today, but unfortunately he was out of the office at meetings, so I do hope to connect with him tomorrow.
And Anne Marie, the other issue was more arrivals than departures.
Town of Hull's issue, I did speak with his assistant, and the little bit that we did speak about the issue, that's correct. The Town of Hull's issue is more about the arrivals as opposed to the departures on runway 33L.
David, do you know what height those planes are over East Milton as they're coming in?
Pardon?
What's the height that they're at? What's the altitude?
On the fours?
On the fours?
It's certainly a lot lower than they are taking off.
So when they take off from 33L, they're 6,000 to 10,000.
They're
But they're
6,000
much.
to 8,000 now. They're supposed to go up 2,000 feet.
So 8 to 10.
When this protocol is really implemented, it's supposed to be 8,000 to 10,000 feet. And Can I just say a few words?
Sure. Yes, come on up, John. Or David.
First of all, I want to say that
David, we need to get you a microphone.
I'm thrilled that Cheryl and the other people, Phil, have formed a committee and that the members of the town are taking some action, because this has been a problem that's been afflicting Milton ever since I've lived here, and that's 33 years now. And if you think it's bad now, you should have lived here when they were taking off on Milton on 22. They used to fly right over the town at full power. I remember a meeting at the school where we had probably 250 people at that meeting, and they were practically throwing rocks at the FAA. And at that point, we changed the flight path of 22, which is now really our best runway. If they're taking off in 22, we hardly hear it. I think this is a battle we should give up and can concentrate on the war. The war is really 3 runways, which between them affect Milton between 50 and 60% of the time year-round. As one example, just in May of this year, 4 right and 4 left, we had over 50% of the landings. 27 out of 30 days, the planes landed on the 4s in May. And this is getting worse. It's getting worse because they're landing later. And they're landing later because they're in stage 3 aircraft, so now they can really bring in whatever planes they want, whenever they want. It's getting worse because more planes are landing in Logan every year. And it's getting worse, I think, for the people under 33, because this protocol, which, you know, they're not picking on the 33s, this is a national initiative. It's affecting all runways, is basically confining and defining the takeoff patterns of planes because of new navigational systems. So the people in the periphery are probably hearing less noise, but the people directly under these planes, and frankly, I don't care if they're flying at 6,000 feet or 10,000 feet, when you're under a plane taking off in full power, you really hear it. I mean, the glass shakes. It's no fun. But fewer people probably are affected. And also, 33 is only taking off over Milton about 6 to 8% of the time. And it's not 2% of the 6 to 8, it's about 25% of the 6 to 8. Only that percentage of the 6 to 8 are really flying over Milton. And when they're over Milton, they're off the RNAV system. They're really under the direction of the tower. They can fly them wherever they want. They're still confined, I think, to a narrower corridor, but they're not under RNAV, at least according to the tower. That's what they say. That's one reason not to do this. I think the other reason is we would be alone. And we've been alone before, and we've been wrong before. We were wrong when Milton, alone among the CAC communities, supported the new runways, 14 and 22, which are hardly ever used. And we are therefore cordially distrusted by every other community in CAC. It was a bad mistake. We're alone because I think it would cost a lot of money, bury the town in paperwork, and it ignores the large issue. It ignores the gorilla in the room, which are the 4s, 4 right and 4 left. That is a flight path we're not going to be able to change. The planes are going to continue to come in over Milton. It is the favorite by far of the FAA. They will use the 4s and the 9s whenever they possibly can. And the percentage is increasing. Every single year it's going up. So I have written a letter to the selectmen, I think every year for 5 years now, saying, in so many words, get off your butts and do something about this. It's time, I think, the selectmen stepped up to the plate, that they realize that this is a real issue in the town. They have to at least take a swing at it. It doesn't cost that much money for somebody to write a letter to the FAA to at least say, Milton is alert to this, we're watching it, we're monitoring it, and frankly, unless we can come to some amicable diplomatic solution, which I think is possible, we're prepared to sue. I've said this in a letter, I really believe it. I think only the preparation and the indication that we really are prepared to go to court with this is going to move the FAA. I don't believe that polite letters from the CAC or from our very astute attorney is going to do much good. And I think the town really has to mobilize around it because it affects our lives, it affects our property values, it affects the quality of life in this town. We just had, I don't know if privilege is the word, the experience of having a movie made at our house. I don't know how much Milton made off this movie, but I bet it was in the six figures if you add the school rentals, the food for the fire department, the lobsters, etc. And the guy who does this, Charlie Harrington, loves this town. He loves the people who work there. He loves the selectmen. He loves Anne Marie. And he sat in our backyard and he said, you know, we'd be making 3 movies a year in Milton every year if it weren't for, and you know what he pointed at, planes coming in the Fords every 2 minutes. That's just one lost opportunity, but there will be more. And word will get out about the town and the noise in the town. And I'll just say it again, it's up to the selectmen. It's up to your elected officials to step up and take a swing. We've never done it. I don't think there's a letter in the file from the Board of the Selectmen to the FAA saying, this is a problem, what are we going to do about it? So concede the battle, concentrate on the war of 3 runways, and 4s are the big gorillas.
Well said. So Tom, you mentioned congressional delegation. Maybe
Yeah,
we can bring them together.
And I like David's idea. It certainly is not costly to write a letter. It can't hurt. So I think we should start there. But then I think immediately we should get in touch with our congressional delegates and just have a meeting first. And I would like at that meeting to have somebody that can really speak to the issue, that's all. Because I don't feel, well, not that I don't feel, I know I'm not an expert on the issue.
Right. And neither am I.
Well, for the reasons that our town council stated, I think the appeal is really not what we should pursue at this time, but we should be doing everything that David Godine has told us we should be doing. And we all take it very seriously. We have a very active citizens group. Many of them are here, so not all of them are here, but this is a group that for the last several months has been gathering data, making presentations, doing a lot of the groundwork. We have a vacancy coming up on the CAC. David is our alternate member. Judy Kennedy is stepping down. So we have a chance to appoint somebody, and we've had some interest from some residents. We've advertised it. We'd really like to get somebody who's got a lot of, or some experience in this area, aviation experience, who can serve on the CAC, be able to get to the meetings, be able to really bring some background and some knowledge about this, and be a real advocate for Milton on the CAC. And I think David's willing to stay on as our alternate member, which I'm grateful for. You've made a good presentation here in the executive session, David, as well as here. But we do need to get our legislative delegation involved. We as a board need to be more involved. And even if we're not appealing the 33L decision, we have to deal with the general noise, with the arrival problem that we're having that's impacting different areas of town.
So will you put calls into Congressman Lynch and Capuano?
And I think it may be helpful, at least initially, and the committee may be able to help us on that. And I know the committee's been really good in terms of getting affidavits from citizens as to airplane noise. I mean, if we could come in with a stack of, of complaints from all our citizens saying these are all votes, and we need to do something, it could help.
You're right. We do need some more arguing from the neighbors, especially over in East Milton.
Yep, so keep it coming.
We need to get the letters from people in East Milton directly under the 4s, as we call them.
But just airplane noise in general, it's getting untenable for too many people.
It is.
And we should probably keep this as well, maybe not an agenda item, but something that once we appoint somebody to the CAC to fill the vacancy, I think we want that person coming in somewhat regularly, maybe quarterly, maybe at least twice a year, to come and update the board on what's going on at the CAC level. Maybe we even want the CAC chairman to come in and talk with us about some of the developments. I think we need an effective advocate for Milton who has some expertise in this area. And we did have an airplane noise committee at one time. We now have an active citizens committee. We might want to consider once we fill CAC vacancy, maybe appointing an airplane noise committee again,
Even if it's the same
even
group,
if it's some of the
because
same people who are involved with the citizens group.
Anything further to add, John?
No.
Okay. All right. We leave it at that. And we'll get back to the public. Okay, next on the agenda is number 7, the approval.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Is it possible to take comment from the, I apologize for being late. Is it possible to take a comment?
In regards to what?
In regards to what you just discussed.
Really,
it's up to you. You want to make an exception?
I'll make an exception. Go ahead. Yeah, but you got to come up, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Didn't make the 6:45. I'm Frank Parker, and a professor at Boston College in real estate, and I'm living at 29 St. Mary's Road while we're out of St. Mary's, so I'm living at the rectory here. I was very involved in the what went on in Hull with Mr. Lemnios and all, and I came to the last meeting. What distresses me is that, and due respect, that was a very fine presentation made by these gentlemen, but you're concentrating just on noise. And our success in Hull was not on noise, it was far more on safety. I wrote a letter to Miss English, who didn't answer, incidentally. I don't know whether the attorney read it, had a chance to read it yet. But detailing that on any day in your town, school day, you have 20,000 students if you in this town, and you've had 4 or 5 aircraft crashes within the area. I put that all in there. That's what, in Hull, it's so small and tight that we were going over everything in Hull. And I think that would be the only question I would have about not questioning this runway you're dealing with now, is that if you try to bring in safety, the next time they're going to say, why didn't you bring it in the first time? But I think these noise ones usually do not win. You've got to get the safety, and there isn't any town around that I know of with as many school children. And, you know, the talk about it, it's already in, because I filed before the 5th of March. So it is in the documents for what you're doing. But please, in all of your discussions, you know, I think the safety of the town. I mean, they had one last week. Didn't they drop some of the oil over Milton? Or? But that's why I think that, you know, you should have a wider swing on what your problem is than just noise.
I think that's a very valid point.
Thank you.
We do have them going over to Cunningham, and we have them going over to the high school. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to talk.
You're welcome. Yeah. Next up is the approval of the management contract for the Max Ullin Rink.
Make a motion
Sure.
to approve the contract between the town of Milton and Curry College for the management and operation of the Max Ullin Rink.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any comment?
Perhaps you want Anne Marie just to go
Anne Marie,
over
would
the,
you? Exactly. Would you tell the public what transpired with this contract?
Bill Clark and I can both speak to this, Mr. Chairman. We currently have a contract with Curry College for management of the Max Ullin Rink, which is due to expire August 31st of 2013.
It was a 3-year contract, right?
It's absolutely a 3-year contract. We then went out for an RFP because we still have a year and a half left on our DCR permit, which expires April 30th of 2015. So we went out for RFP to have the management of the rink for the next year and a half. We did have one bidder, and that was Curry College. And Bill, if you want to take it from here.
Can I just ask a question, if you don't mind, so that because this happened before I got on the board.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom, you probably know this. So the town of Milton is leasing the Ullin Rink for 5 years, correct?
it's under a permit.
Under a permit for 5 years, and then Curry is leasing it from the town of Milton for 3 years.
Curry is managing
Yeah,
it on
Is
behalf.
managing it for
We're
the
not
town of
leasing
Milton.
We're not leasing it from them, and they're not leasing from us. We were awarded a so-called special permit. We don't have the special permit. What we have is a letter of award. There is a difference.
Okay.
With that letter of award, we've been running the rink for 3 years. We had conversations with the previous DCR commissioner, and those were supposed to continue. We've had limited conversations with DCR over the last 3 years. We've been looking, since we took the operation of the rink over, to attempt to get a long-term lease for the rink from DCR. There's legislation that allows it. There's been some change in legislations in the financing, in state financing coming back to DCR provided by the legislature. Where before everything that they made went back to the general fund of the state. Now 80% of what is made at a rink goes back to DCR. So DCR is not looking to give away any more of its assets or let somebody else run its assets when it can keep some of that money themselves. They just have to find out which ones can they make money on, which ones can they say are losers. You're not going to run a skating rink and make money with the rates that we're forced to have to abide by. When we took over when we put in an application the first time for the rink, we had conversations with then commissioner saying that, look, we would have to in the future address rates, and he agreed. Currently, the present commissioner does not feel that way, and neither does his legal staff. So we're still having those conversations. We're still under the terms of a 5-year lease. We've had 3 go by. We've got a 1.5 years left. We as a town aren't in the rink business. We shouldn't be in the rink business. We had an agreement with Curry to run the rink for us. Between their ground staff, their management people, they've done a very good job. They also have put in over $300,000 in capital items into the rink. We've met every item that DCR put in the original terms to get to the rinks. Everything had to be prevailing wage. We did everything they asked for, and we did it per their terms. We've gone after energy rebates for all of the items we put into the rink. Curry received over $54,000 in energy rebates with the roof and the sidewall insulation. They weren't there before we took over the rink. Presently, we've got it down that Curry loses just under $60,000 a year in running the rink. In the new response to the present RFP, they have asked that we not use the proposed contract that we came in with, but would prefer to run under the existing contract, so we'll modify it. We only had 1 respondent. We seem to have done a pretty good job with them. It has not cost the town any money to date to run the rink. And I'd suggest we go with Curry for the next 2 years and use Curry's management team to help us with DCR to either attain the long-term lease that we've been talking about consistently, because we need to, capital items need to be improved at the rink. We need a new Zamboni. A new Zamboni's between $100,000 and $150,000.
The long-term lease, is that 20 years or something?
25.
25.
But nobody is going to, for 5 years,
Buy a Zamboni.
take on the cost of a Zamboni. And now, with a year and a half, no one's going to do that either. So that's where we are. We're up against, we've got a Zamboni that's over 15 years old. The charging, the entire thing had to be rebuilt motor-wise last year, belts-wise the year before. The charger unit needs to be replaced now. It's just a matter of, we keep putting Band-Aids on broken pieces. The boards need to be replaced because the amount of pressure that they're taking from the Zamboni, from the usage, they need
Needs
to be
work.
replaced. They need to be built into the capital items list. And we're looking to take and push DCR for those capital items. I know the cooling tower is another. The size of the compressors that make the ice, the compressors are too small. They need to be
Enlarged.
enlarged. There's a lot of good things about the rink, but there's a lot of things that when the state had the opportunity to rebuild the rink, they were looking to cut a few corners in different places, and they made the motors a little bit smaller. Would it do the job? Yes, it did. Did they have to worry about the efficiency part of it? No, they didn't. So they made it fit their model. It does not fit a sustainable model, and that's where we are, is trying to make the rink cost-effective and sustainable, and we're running into issues with that.
Ask a question, Bill? In terms of this 2-year contract, what does it say in terms of them absorbing, how much more operating loss are they going to absorb, or are they willing to absorb in this contract, and as well as capital improvements?
The capital item was $22,000. 22,000 is going to hit, that gets chewed up really quick.
Yeah.
That we're attempting to find a way to take the operating cost and not have that come as a loss again. Those items would be the rate increase that we asked for back in February.
Let's assume we don't get it, though. And right now, they said no.
Right now they're saying no. We're still pushing on the issue. They've agreed to come back to the table and talk about it.
Yeah.
And their conversation just before the 4th was right after the 4th. Well, we're after the 4th, and we need to call back and have these conversations. It didn't make any sense for us to take and push the issue until we had a management team. If we didn't have a management team, my opinion is we would have given the rink back to DCR and say, you know, you run it.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to us to run a rink that we keep losing on, and that's not our forte. And obviously, it's not theirs.
But Curry will absorb any additional losses.
To this point, if they will go with the new contract, and if we'll allow them to move some of the scheduled hours, they can make some of that money back by changing some of the scheduled hours, selling more of the prime time to a higher priced number.
Yeah. And requiring
Yes.
taking non-prime time.
Yes. And taking on a prime time for a longer period of time.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Bill, I have a question. We had a gentleman in at Citizen Speak named Timothy Kiernan who talked about 2 issues. One was use of the rink by the youth hockey groups and I think the high school hockey team. And the second one was about an oversight committee, and it's possible Tom Ranry, or I have information on this as well. In looking at this, it looks like they were indicating that this free public skating hours has actually increased, but that's not what we were told in Citizen Speak. Do you have any information about that?
I do. There's been an increase in the public skating from when DCR had the rink to as Curry runs the rink right now. There has been a change in the hours of that. So if you go back to Mrs. Keating's comment about Friday nights were open for public skating, they've taken those same primetime public hours and given them to somebody who's paying for them. Public skating is for nothing. It's free. It comes at a cost that the rink is open. We have to have personnel. and we have to have ice before and after that event. The number one user of ice at the rink is Milton Youth Hockey. The group that gets first choice of ice time is Milton High School.
What about the,
I know that we have an issue with trying to line up when that public skating comes about. If we can, and I know we've had this discussion with DCR, if we can take that same public skating and be able to charge a nominal fee for the public skating, they'll move those hours into the prime time, some of the hours into the prime time.
the memo we were given in Citizen Speak says Saturday public skating has been eliminated and Sunday times are on an irregular schedule.
And I think it had to do when they took on the new, they took on, is it Commonwealth Skating as a new renter. I think they got like 10% of the ice time. When they came on board, some of the public skating on Saturday did move. I think it's tournaments that make the Sunday stuff erratic. But it comes back to,
I guess the real issue is financial, yeah, it's sustainability. And
where do you draw the line?
if we
on
can't increase
how much
prices at
we're
all.
going to lose, how much? And if I'm robbing Peter to pay Paul to keep the thing open, and if I have to lose somewhere, it's putting the public skating at times that are probably a little less convenient than people were used to.
My understanding too is a lot of the DCR rinks that were permitted out to privates were at a much higher considerably higher hourly ice time rate than was allowed.
It's from all the documentation we have and we've been given, when we rent ice right now to Milton Youth Hockey, it's for $175 an hour. When one of those private rinks rents out to their local youth hockey, it's $250 an hour. So there's a lot of wiggle room at $75 an hour.
Right. We're not trying to make money, but we don't want to lose money.
Right.
As far as the
Oversight Committee?
I'm not sure about the Oversight Committee, but we get a full financial accounting every year from Curry. That's public record. I don't know if it's up on the website or not, though, is it?
I don't believe it is up on the website now.
We could put it up there, I suppose.
That would be beneficial, yeah.
But we do get quite a detailed.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you, Bill. Okay, number 8 is public hearing, a gas main installation at Gun Hill Street. Anyone here from National Grid?
Hello.
Barbara Kelleher. I'm the acting permits representative for Dennis Regan. And
You're looking for a permit to install a gas main in Gun Hill
correct.
for 3 houses, is it?
I believe there's 4. There's
4 houses.
Yeah, 4 lots on it.
So you're going to come off the main, 480 feet, and then
480.
tap into 3 different locations?
Correct. That's correct. Mhm.
And is there going to be any impact to the tearing up the streets, or is it all?
It's, yes, there will be a time that that the street will have to be torn up.
Street
Not the
opening.
whole street.
Okay. And Gun Hill hasn't been repaved, right? Amber? Okay.
Joe's not a new street.
Recently,
right?
no.
Gun Hill is not a new street.
Oh, Gun Hill's one of the oldest streets in town.
Okay.
So I thought, okay.
I noticed in the materials that the DPW recommendation had a contingency that we should take into account when we approve this, although it's not included in the motion, but contingent on National Grid's willingness to relocate the proposed gas main corridor onto the paved roadway because private sewer force mains, or a private sewer force main. Oh, we have a revised one?
Yeah, you have it in your
Is this on the common driveway?
Okay.
Have the revised one?
Yes.
So Joe, that would mean that the gas main goes up Gun Hill, takes a left on the common driveway, right, in the middle of it?
So people can hear my answer. Come near the microphone.
Bless you.
The concern is once the gas service, if you will, the common service comes off of the private property down the common drive, and it reaches the gutter, as shown on the proposed sketch, and it runs southerly on Gun Hill. The concern is that there is a force main that serves a number of the houses along that area in that same location, and it's just not wise to put these utilities. In fact, it's the purpose of the granted location is to assign a corridor that makes sense. So John's letter recommends is that it comes down the common drive across the street and runs up the other side of the street. And in my understanding, he's had conversations with the engineering folks at National Grid, and that works for them.
Okay, that sounds good.
I will propose a motion to approve a request from National Grid to install and maintain approximately 480 feet, more or less, of 4-inch gas main in Gun Hill Street from the existing 4-inch gas main near number 185 northerly to a common driveway to serve 4 lots contingent upon the applicant's willingness to relocate the proposed gas main corridor onto the paved roadway as a private sewer force main exists in the roadway shoulder where the gas main is currently proposed, according to the plan dated 6/18/2013.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
And number 9 on the agenda is public hearing for conduit installation, Milton Hill Road continued. Anyone here from the NSTAR? Hello.
Good evening. I'm Sheila Gillis, here on behalf of NSTAR Electric.
And my understanding, Sheila, is that this was a job that was done without a permit. Are you aware of this?
It's my understanding that there was a house or something that had some kind of problem out there, and they went out and they took care of that. But this work itself hasn't been done. This work involves the entire street.
Right. Our understanding is that it's complete.
That's our understanding as well, and that's based with the NSTAR's field engineering folks too, that the work is already complete.
320 feet, 2 conduits. So you're saying it's not done, and you're saying it is done?
I was told today that it wasn't done.
So is it done or not?
There is work in this location that is complete, that has no granted location previously granted. It's in the street, so, and that was so much as admitted by NSTAR's staff engineer. I'm sorry, again. My information is, from staff members who handle the permitting section, who, deal with these on a regular basis. And Mr. Thompson, assures me that, he's had a meeting on the site. He's verified that with NSTAR's engineering folks, on site, not over the telephone, and has verified that the work is in place. And in fact, was done a couple of years ago, in 2011, fall of 2011. That be it what it may, I mean, the reality is, there needs to be a permit for whatever's in the street, and I think the permit takes on 2 species. One is first a grant of location permission from the Board of Selectmen that allows them to be in the street in our right-of-way. And then second to that is a street opening permit for any work they're physically doing by digging up the street. And that happens at the staff level. So neither of which occurred for the prior work. And John's letter speaks for itself for this proposed work. So I think at the very least, there is no granted location for this. You need to grant one for the work that is there and any work currently proposed and doing in that same corridor.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're going to get a grant of location, but we have to be certain that permits are pulled. I mean, you can't just dig up 320 feet of public roadway.
With no
Was there a detail? Was there?
I spoke with Mr. Thompson today, and he also told me the same thing that he told the DPW director, that this work was done in 2011, and he had to have them out again in the spring of 2012 to fix some of the defects in the roadway. He said that he spoke with the police department today, but it was back in 2011, and they couldn't readily find whether or not there was a detail on that.
Okay,
So why is this grant of location coming to us now? If the work's already been done? And apparently done 2 years
It's
ago.
my understanding that it wasn't done. That's how it was given to me, over to me to come to the hearing, to present it, that it wasn't done.
Can we get somebody else off from NSTAR that can clarify this more? Because we're at odds here.
If it was done, was there a dig safe done? I mean, you can't dig the street without a dig safe number, correct, Joe?
You can, but it's against the law.
What's against the law? I
That's
mean, you're
correct.
taking a risk of all the other utilities in the street.
There were no town markouts.
Just for clarification, I was going to say by clarification, Town of Milton is not a member of DigSafe by virtue of any utility or any other entity simply applying for DigSafe number. We don't get notified. So they could have notified DigSafe and could have notified other utilities, but we would not have been notified on that.
So you don't require a dig safe number before you issue a permit?
We do require one before they issue a permit, so, you know, that's the burden of proof, is the first burden of proof is a leap of faith, and that is that the applicant will come through and apply for a permit. Once they come in, then we do diligence, making certain all the paperwork's in place. The only reason that John took the position that he does, he saw the plan for the grant of location coming through normal channels, coming through the selectman's office for the hearing, reviewed the plan as he would anyone, out on the street, and found that the work being proposed is in fact the exact same work that he saw in 2011. How we found out about it in 2011 was one by accident, by virtue of during the winter season, 11 and 12, the roadway being rutted and having some very great difficulties in plowing the street. In researching at the time, did he determine that, lo and behold, that NSTAR had done some work out there. At least that's his recollection as reported to me.
And the tearing up of the road is consistent with this plan?
It's consistent with this plan, and this plan is consistent with the work that's physically out there now. Now, whether they're proposing to do yet more work, it's probably true. I think this person is being quite truthful in that fact. But I don't think it removes the fact that the other work isn't secured by a grant of location.
So, Joe, are we saying that in 2011, the DPW observed work being done?
No, we found it by virtue of snow plowing and finding the defect in the roadway. We became aware of it by that.
Okay. But at that time, was there any, I'm just wondering,
That's what
did we have any
resulted-
obligation then at that time to look into whether this, and ask the questions in 2011?
I think at that point is when John, as a result of the defect, got them up there, at least fixed the roadway in the spring of 12, which I think is what his letter said. And, you know, could we have said, you know, I guess we wouldn't have necessarily thought that they didn't have a grant of location. It was only by virtue of seeing this come in this time, you know, seeking a grant of location, did John look at the record and find out, holy cow, it never was in place to begin with, even back then.
Well, before I'm ready to vote positive on this, I want somebody from NSTAR to explain what was done in 2011, what is currently supposed to be done, why a permit wasn't pulled, why a grant of location wasn't filed, and were dig-safe permits actually issued. And I'm not going to vote positively until I hear that.
Okay.
I would take the same stance. I mean, you need a grant of location whether it's done or whether it's not done.
Yes.
But what we need somebody who actually knows if it was or wasn't done. I mean, you were sent here and we respect that. But we need to have somebody here who can say, yes, it was done and we didn't pull the permits. If that's what happened, we'll grant it.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't done, we'll also grant it. But we need answers.
And some assurances, well, some
Yeah.
assurances won't happen again if that is the case, and
Exactly.
some assurances that it was done properly.
Exactly. We need to legalize one way or the other, but we need to know if it's in there or not.
Okay.
So we're going to hold off on this for now. Would you agree?
I agree. No, we need to make sure this doesn't happen again, so.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Next up is the approval of the FY14 water and sewer rates. And we do have Joe at the table.
Are we actually approving the race tonight?
Next meeting, we'll be
Yes.
approving the rates tonight. It's just your discussion.
Okay, so the agenda is incorrect then in terms of what.
Should be discussion, right?
It's just discussion.
Yeah, okay.
I think Anne Marie Fagan, Town Administrator, circulated the draft water and sewer recommendation analysis report back on July 12th. I'm sure you've all had an opportunity to see it, maybe review it. We can go through it briefly in summary, and at that point, I'll entertain any questions, or if you want me to go into more detail, I can go into more detail. If you turn to the first page, let me just tell you where, by way of background, mostly for the people at home, the water system has a cost to operate it, and the sewer system has a cost to operate it. And those include direct costs and indirect costs, meaning the things that we have to pay for out of hand, salaries and wages, in supplies, in equipment, in materials. Those are direct costs. And the cost of buying our water from the MWRA, they call it the assessment, is a direct cost. And on the sewer end of things, it's the MWRA assessment that they charge us for collecting our sewerage is a direct cost, and the cost of our manhole covers and our capital work that we do, and our salary and wages and equipment, yet again, are direct costs. Indirect costs are those other costs that circulate through town hall in support of those enterprises. Each of those water systems and sewer systems is known as an enterprise. So a portion of Anne Marie's time, a portion of the town accountant's time, a portion of various staff over there, a portion of the employee benefits package, and that gets vetted during the warrant committee hearings and during town meeting. And they're all included in the budget, and that becomes the cost to operate the enterprise. The revenue has to support that, and the goal is always to try to have as close, at least at the beginning, to a balance between the ability to generate revenue and the cost to run the operation of the enterprise. So the premise is to try to balance that in any given year. And how do we raise revenue? Well, we raise revenue through rates. And how do we collect money from rates is we sell water and we charge for the sewer that we collect and measure. So we forecast, first of all, what our sales are going to be, like any other business. It's going to be a strong year, it's going to be a weak year. What are the trends? Is it hot? As hot as it's been these past few weeks, up through June 1, our consumption from June 1 last year is actually down 2%. So we have gone from a trend of increasing our sales maybe 1% each year over the past 5 years, excepting last year where we said we're not going to increase it at all. And this year's proposal is we're actually analyzed, and we believe that the trend is we're projecting a 2% reduction in water sales.
Because of people conserving, or just because
of people conserving and other climatic concerns, just simply not selling as much water. The other thing that is for clarity, but it's kind of complicated to get your arms around, particularly people at home perhaps, is that our assessment is based on the previous calendar year's water. So when the MWRA gives their assessment to us, it's based on the water that they sold to us from January 1 of 11 through December 30th of 12. So we're...
12 or 11? Or 1 year, right? So January of 11 to December of 11?
January 1 of 12 through December of 12. So the assessment that we're in 14 was based on last year.
Right. Okay.
So right off the bat, we're paying, even though our trend in water sales has gone down this year, we're actually paying for last year's water. So there's always that 1 year time lag. And typical of any enterprise fund, that always happens once. You can either forecast early and work with real assessments and do with town meeting in arrears, or you can do what we do, which is built on the prior year's assessment and just simply move forward on a consistent basis every year. So that being said, is we have projected a 2% reduction in sales. In theory, that equates to right off the bat, a 2% increase necessary just to, of rates, just in order to meet the loss in sales. So there's the revenue piece of it from rate revenue. But we also have liens, and we have people apply for permits, and we have fees that we charge, and we have other revenues, and we also have the ability to transfer out of fund balance certain monies on given years to stabilize or soften or make more consistent any rate increases that may be more dramatic in some years. You can use it to soften that impact in given years. So if you look on page 3 of the report, pretty simple balance sheet for water and sewer. The top being the costs that I described, and those costs come right out of your town meeting warrant. In your revenues, they come right out of your town meeting warrant, with the exception of fund balance transfers. There's 2 separate lines, one for sewer and one for water. Those fund balance transfers will be getting addressed, assuming action tonight and action in the meeting in August with the selectmen of whether we go this way or not. If the idea is to stabilize rates, would be to transfer those funds to do that, and we would do that in special town meeting, which is now the 2nd annual town meeting in October. It's no longer a special town meeting. So that's the revenue side of it. And as you can see, if you look at the utility costs versus the revenues for both water and sewer, you can see there's some sort of a balance there. I'm going to ask you to turn to the horizontal table 2 pages forward, and that's the rate calculation for water. And what you're looking at is, based on our analysis and based on that reduction in sales, you can see we assign, based on historical use, based on statistical probability, what we might think we might sell at the various tiers in cubic feet. And basically, if you've got those number of units being sold, it helps us derive what the current rate, which is the next block down, if you will, the FY13 rate. If we kept it current, what sort of revenue it would generate at those projected sales, and what the resulting balance condition would be versus the need. And as you can see, if we were to not do anything with the if we were not to do anything and keep the FY13 rate consistent in 14, the enterprise water would operate at a $418,000 deficit. So, and this is a shocker, but I'm saying the shocker by virtue of warning. If we were to increase the water rate by 8.7% at the various tiers, we would generate a balance of positive $8, and again, the goal being to have it as near as balanced as possible.
So when you use the 8.7, you just do that right across the board, so it's increasing each rate 8.7?
Correct. That's what we have done historically. Historically, some people would think it's far from historical. We have historically applied it equally across all tiers. You don't need to. You can top load one and not another. You can put it all on one tier. Truly, it comes down to the Board of Water Commissioners. During this discussion, you are that. And similarly, you are the Board of Sewer Commissions, and we talk about them. However, historically, they have, in fact, done it equitably across all 4 tiers. Now, I point out the 8.7% because it seems like that's quite high. But before we get into detail talking about that, let's flip to the next page and looking at the sewer. The exact same methodology is based on the number of units projected on sales of water, which equate to the amount of gallons of flow going down the sewer pipe. You could see that we would generate a negative actually there should be negative $150,000 balance, keeping the rates the same. However, what we're proposing on the fund balance is a way to structure or soften the total rate that the consumer pays in the total bill, is to actually propose a 2.4% rate reduction in sewer. What that would have combined on most households in Milton is a 1.5% increase on your water and sewer bill combined in the course of a year.
Net increase.
Increase, 1.5%. So the reason why it's so dramatic is, you know, the sewer rates are so much higher than the water rates.
So,
Now-
question for you.
Sure.
What causes, because, you know, one is somewhat dependent upon the other, is it the MWRA assessment for sewer had gone down that dramatically from one year to the next? And why, when it's kind of dependent upon the water usage?
It did, and first of all, it's not linear.
Yeah.
Water is pretty much linear. It's really based on the number of gallons they sell us, and then some other very minor factors. Sewer is far more complicated. It's wet weather flow, it's low weather flow, it's the average of the 3 prior years. And without getting it right down and analyzing it to the penny, I can tell you that Milton, by comparison to other communities, is very aggressive, and people see it every year. We're very aggressive in removing our inflow and infiltration. We're removing a lot of extraneous flow. We're out inspecting pipes, we are lining pipes, and by taking that extraneous flow out, our wet weather flows drop down at a greater percentage to our other member communities, and we get a share of,
When you say
we
wet
get a
weather
benefit
flow,
of flow
it's
share.
it's stuff seeping into the...
Seeping in,
Okay,
seeping in. Yep.
okay.
And we've been quite aggressive, and we have been for years, and we do that every year, and quite frankly, it's cost-effective. And the more we remain consistent and the other communities find themselves waning off, we get an accelerated benefit of flow share. So that's why it's not linear as compared to water.
One other question, in terms of the water, and I know it's a difficult thing to do, but when we had the big increase the year before, and we had a discrepancy between the MWRA inflow and our outflow, did we do any analysis on the 2012 calendar year inflow, outflow, and
We found from the time that we launched the original challenge, which was based on the prior year's assessment, which was, you know, the calendar year 11, if you will, that their meters, once they got calibrated and once they came into line, we found them to be very consistent. They have a very regular calibration and monitoring program that they notify us on. We spot check it every morning just to see any overnight blips that don't make sense.
Yep.
And we find it to be far more effective across all 3 meters.
how much unaccounted for water do we have?
We're high. I mean, we're high as far as I'd like it to be, but we're not high nationally. We're about 15% unaccounted for. It seems like a big number, but...
That consistent with the year before and this year, or?
It fluctuates. If you have, even though it's a statistical quirk, I mean, I call it unbilled water, because I can still account for water. I mean, I can estimate how much water we put on a forest fire in the woods, like by pumping rates of trucks and how long they're running. We can actually estimate the water that was used. So when we add that in, it comes a lot less.
Okay.
But under the statistical reporting requirements for DEP,
It's unaccounted.
the accounted for, that everybody's on the same playing field, they just simply define that it has to be that way.
Yep.
And we're around 15%. And it does fluctuate every year depending on, we do our leak detection every year, we don't find any major leaks, but we do in fact have leaks when they break, when the pipes break. But, and one of the things we asked for in this year's capital and town meeting approved was the purchase of leak detection equipment, so we can do that more aggressively in-house, rather than relying on a consultant to come in once a year and do it. We can do it multiple times a year in various trouble areas. So we're going to, I think, be able to rein that in even tighter in coming years. So this was proposed. The rest of it is graphics to show, how it's used and divvied out by tier. I think the next one's important to look at, because I think we have so many things on the table, including a couple of other discussions later on in the agenda tonight. What it boils down to, if you look at the next graphic, you can see that we're generating half, 49%, if you will, of our total revenue for water at that highest tier. So when you start hitting the brink of pressure, and I don't mean water pressure, but I mean financial pressure, people are going to continue to bathe, they're going to continue to drink the water, and they're going to continue to cook with it. but they're going to perhaps start waning off on the irrigation. And I think when you start, as we're projecting that 2% loss, we're expecting to lose that at that fourth tier.
yeah.
So we're losing our revenue at the higher rate. And it's important to point that out because there are a couple of initiatives moving forward. We have the Canton folks here this evening who are asking for some consideration for how they're billed as one of our customers. We have other folks in town who've asked us to look at our rate structure and the equity or inequity in our rate structure. And I think that as we move forward into this year, and it's part of our water capital plan, which you guys approved approved the award of that contract a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. One of the elements in that is to look at the financials and to really look at the rate structure and look at completely revamping our rate structure. It may not look at all like a 4-tier system next year when we take into account all of those other changes that we're getting pressure on.
Right.
So, as we move into next year, I think you'll probably see the first parts of that roll out for discussion late fall, November-ish. And, to have that in place, to have a strategy in place well early in FY14, so as we embark upon setting the rates for 15, we'll have more than a policy or more than a strategy. We'll have a decision from the water commissioners of what the new rate structure is going to look like. And our consultant will be able to.
I guess that's what gets frustrating is, and I think for townspeople it does too, the more people conserve because of the lag in the assessment, the more people conserve, the higher the rate goes.
Higher the rate goes up.
Because we're getting billed based upon consumption the year before, which would have been higher. So the rate increases that way. And if collectively all of the towns conserve at basically the same rate, then nothing happens to rates because most of the MWA costs are fixed. And it doesn't really impact much. So the only way we really save is if we conserve a lot more than somebody else does.
So the purpose of tonight, I thought, was to roll this out, which you've had now for about a week and a half, to see if there are specific questions on that. The goal would be to have what Wood and Curran, as we have in the past, come in and make the more detailed presentation in that first meeting in August. It give you an opportunity more than in one night to have to sit here and say, I need you to pass the rate tonight. No, I'm saying you need to pass it in the next meeting in August, the first meeting in August, in order for us to get that first round of bills out on time.
And I think that's what most people are looking for is the percentage increase, and that's 1.5%?
1.5 combined. We're looking to give them a 2.4% reduction in sewer and a 8.7% increase in water, but a net of 1.5% increase across the board.
Can you say those two numbers again?
It will.
The increase in water?
8.7%, a 2.4% reduction in sewer, and the net combined effect is a 1.5% increase on your combined water and sewer bill.
I have a question for Joe. So, Joe, you've touched on this a little bit, but we have on our agenda to talk about also just the follow-up about the 88 Wharf Street issue that the Condominium Association has raised with us. We discussed this in May at one of our meetings, and I know you were doing some follow-up research. You did give us a booklet, but it was an annual water and sewer rate survey from 2012, which shows that a lot of other towns have tiered structures like we do. But we were looking specifically at the issue of whether the equities in the rate in the 4 tiers, because the issue that 88 Wharf Street has raised with us is that they only have 1 meter at the condominium building, so they're paying, they believe, and I think we've all agreed at our meeting in May, they're paying a tier 4 essentially, and so they're paying a very high rate for their water, even though they have 73 units. They have units with, some units have only 1 or 2 people, and those specific residents are probably using a lot less water, and if they were billed with a separate meter, they'd be paying a lower amount. But because
some snowbirds aren't even there in the winter.
Yes. So we talked about trying to see whether there was anything that we could do for 88 Wharf Street, but also for others that may be in that situation as well, to address some of the equitable issues that have been raised by the condo association.
Yeah, the very first step, which I had actually embarked on probably about the same time. Yeah, it was May 23rd when I started getting responses back on these. I sent out a questionnaire, which I've just passed out. The first sheet is the 52 MWA communities, which came right out of that yellow book that you just referred to. MWA communities, and I sent out a questionnaire to each of them. In one, I was surprised in this busy time that I actually got 25 responses back, so just pretty good representation of responses on a blind questionnaire. And the questions I asked were trying to hone in on exactly how do we measure up to other communities, not so much the equity, but what are we doing something that's so unique that maybe it's all by itself unfair, or are we in fact doing something similar to other communities? So I asked the following questions on the second page: does your community use a multi-tier rate structure? And I asked the question both as regards to water and as regards to sewer. And Katie, just as you had noticed that, 76% of those communities in fact use a multi-tier community for water, structure for water and sewer. For some reason, they don't. There are some communities that don't do it, and 72% of them do use the tier. I then asked, does your community use a separate residential versus a commercial or industrial water rate? And recognizing that we're not a industrial or a commercial community, but there are others certainly in the MWA basis that shift their water and sewer burden onto the business and industry as opposed to the resident. And in fact, we saw that there were only 4%, only 4 communities, 16% of them do in fact have a separate commercial industrial rate. 84% do not, and that was the same for water and sewer. I then asked, does your community have a maximum amount that you bill? I had heard that there were people who actually had a maximum. Once you hit to a certain level, that's it, you wouldn't pay any more. No communities that responded had such a thing. We do, in fact, offer a minimum. Our Tier 1 is a minimum rate. So basically, if you don't use any water, you still get a bill from us because there's just the cost of maintaining that service. And it's nominal, by the way. But out of the communities that responded, 36% do, in fact, have a minimum. 64 do not. And that was the same for water and sewer. And now I get right to the crux of the matter, and I asked the master meter questions. Does your community require a single master meter for multi-unit buildings? 64% of the water, actually water and sewer is exactly the same. 64% of the communities that answered do in fact require the master meter, us included. 36% do not. There were, even though there were some that didn't require it, my side note on the comments there, some of them did make provisions for 2-unit facilities and condominiums. And what those, I didn't get into the detail of it. This was a survey. I couldn't make it unwieldy, so I didn't get into the details of just how they structured that condominium forgiveness, if you will. The next question I asked is, does your community allow for individual meters on multi-unit buildings? This one's more divided. 52% of them do allow individual meters, and 48% of them, plain old fashioned, don't. And we're one of the communities that don't allow it.
It seems
However,
inconsistent
I know, with the prior question.
the prior question. You would think they're mutually exclusive, but, either it's a master meter or it's multimeters, and in both cases, the majority is yes.
I think the comment, I think, actually tries to shed a little more light, may not completely address that lack of logic. They do require master meters for anything that's, many of them require them for more than 2 units. Individual meters were allowed on 2-unit condominiums. Individual meters were allowed after the master meter, meaning they still wanted the master meter, but they allowed individual unit meters afterwards. So whether they were billing on that master meter basis or not, and then allowing the individual meters for billing purposes. 4 communities allow for only condos regardless of the number of units, and 5 other communities allow them as private meters only used for the assessment to the individual unit owners. So I think that kind of holds into it.
They'd be billed at the master meter rate, but then divided amongst
But
the unit owners.
they're allowed
based
to
upon-
prorate it to their users.
Yeah, okay.
And, all of those answers are all right here. The next question I asked was, does your community calculate charges for water and sewer based on actual total consumption read from the master meter? And 80% of those communities that responded, in fact, bill it on that master meter. And that's same for water and sewer. So does your community calculate charges for water and sewer based on the higher tier, based upon total consumption of all the individual meters? This one was hard to really understand why the numbers are what they are, and I think it's basically because, first of all, they do charge at tier, but on those communities that don't have tiers, that still require master meters, I think they were answering that we're not charging at tier. We're only charging at our single tier, but we do require the master meter. So I think it skewed the numbers in a different direction. But those numbers are 40% do charge at tier and 60% do not charge at tier. And we do charge at tier. So does your, next question I asked was, does your community calculate charges for water and sewer based on the lower tier, based on equivalent per unit consumption? That's awkward words, and I'm not certain if people fully understood it, because I had a couple of calls from people responding, asking what the hell I meant there. And what I meant there was, in the 88 WAF circumstances, take your total consumption and divide it by 72, and then put it at the tier on a per unit basis. I think they were so confused. 92% said, no, we don't do that.
The two that responded said they do it for condominiums.
And I think that's going to be the bottom line here, is I think that we have one more to go through, and then I'll try to summarize
sure.
what I think I garnered for results on the survey. I then asked, does your community calculate charges for water and sewer based on actual unit consumption read from the individual meters? And 64% said that they do charge based on the unit meters, which does also differ from that earlier report where 48% of them said that they allowed it, but they're saying they actually charged for more than that, so it does make a heck of a lot of sense.
Yeah.
36% that they said they do it on individual units, and 64% say they do not. And again, the note on the side there mostly boils it down to condos. So what I was able to garner out of the survey, and it's really more esoteric than it is analytical from a dollar perspective, is what Milton is doing is pretty consistent with what most of the member communities that, MWRA member communities that respond to the survey are doing, with the exception that those communities who've made exceptions seem to be doing it for condos. That's what I garner out of this, because we don't do it for condos. So this data is just a very starting point. It was really to give me a thumbnail, just to prepare for rate discussion, but also to get an understanding as I was putting the RFP out for our water system master plan update, to be able to tell the responding consultants, what are we concerned about when we look at the rate structure? And I think one of the things we're telling our consultant is we're concerned about the ability to raise the rates at the higher tiers, particularly if our sales are dropping at the higher tiers, one. I think we're concerned about what we're doing with our multi-tenant units, and if we were to make a change to that, what would be the effect on the rate structure moving forward? And lastly, what do we need to do as far as changing our regulations? We, meaning the Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners, to change the regulations, because right now the regulations say that we shall charge through a master meter.
Question, Joe. There's some confusion, I think, at this point over physically can an 88 WAF put in individual meters? I mean, is that possible to do? And I heard conflicting information. Some say yes, some say no. Do you have any idea at this point?
I think it's a red herring. They say they can. I'm an engineer. Everything's possible. It's a matter of money. It's a matter of effort and disruption, particularly in our business, disruption. I believe that their plumbing, they could put a meter, my suspicion is and I'm only visualizing, their main comes into the building, it runs down the corridor, up through a chase into the next corridor, and it branches off to individual units. I believe they could put a meter in the hallways at each of those branch connections so those people can get it.
Now, the question is how you
Much
read
like-
them.
Much like our unidirectional antenna problem
Yep.
in the schools with density of mass, we will not be able to read those antennas electronically. So they would have to run all of their wires back with amplifiers to an antenna array outside that we could still continue to read those individually. So, can you do it? Sure.
Okay.
Is it cost effective? They think so. And they're willing to explore that.
I mean, the only reason I ask is I'm more inclined to be in favor of a system like that as opposed to the Brockton methodology, for a number of reasons. One, if they're willing to go through that expense and are serious about it, it doesn't set the precedent of allowing every condominium. I mean, I guess new construction, they probably would just automatically put the individual meters in, but perhaps other condominiums are just going to say it's not worth it. And we don't have that many anyways.
Oh, we do. I mean,
Well, condominiums. If you look at condominiums, there aren't many high-rise, most of them are.
I would agree with that.
Most
that
of them are
clarification.
garden-style.
Which have separate meters.
Which have separate meters, yeah.
Yeah, the large residential rental units are not condominiums.
Right.
And those, I think by way of the survey, doesn't show that they're addressing those in other communities.
Right.
We don't have many condominiums. I would agree with that.
So if they were to put in individual meters, would that reduce their tier from
Sure-
4
sure
to
it will.
1, is it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Excuse me? Oh,
Tier 4 to tier?
Probably.
Probably, almost.
Tier 1? What would the difference in revenue be? Did you calculate that?
I ran a thumbnail based on prior year's consumption. My analysis is pretty rudimentary, but I.
They gave us a.
They gave us their own analysis. What were they showing on theirs? I'll look at what I have.
Compared to the town, it's not a huge chunk of revenue.
It was about 25,000 a year that we would have to make up.
Yeah.
How would you make that up then? All the other ratepayers. Oh, yeah, I mean, again, that, just as we discussed earlier when we were talking about the rates, if I'm not making money at tier, it has to be absorbed elsewhere, so that's why it's impossible
Right.
to include any discussion.
So we're giving somebody a break, but somebody has to pay it.
Correct. Now, it'd be spread across the rest of the population.
Right, right.
So as opposed to 72, 73 unit owners bearing that cost themselves at the higher tier, it would be spread across the other,
So it'd be portions of pennies.
9,900 customers, the others.
Portions of pennies, most
I think
likely.
we estimated it would be just a couple of dollars. Didn't we at our May meeting for what would be
A couple of dollars in terms of the total.
all the other
Total use.
ratepayers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of the actual rate mills.
It was a very small amount.
Make up the 25 grand?
Yeah.
On a per household basis, it's probably not much more than that. I don't recall the number. Did we analyze it, or we take an educated guess at it?
Probably an educated guess.
Probably, yeah, probably.
Because I don't remember
You
analyzing
gave
it.
us some information, but I don't
So-
know if that was included in it.
Cost them a lot more than $25,000 to put individual meters in there.
Well, I think that, you know, I've spoken to Mr. Sullivan, who's one of the trustees of the association, condo association. I've spoken to him several times over the past 4 years. I think they're quite confident that their return on investment is a couple of years, and that moving forward, they think it's money well spent.
What would the difference between tier 4 and tier 3 be?
Don't
Obviously
understand
much
it.
less.
Yeah.
It would be less, but I think their goal is they see themselves becoming a conglomerate tier 4 into a separate aggregate.
Tier 1.
Individuals tier 1s. I think that's what they see. I don't think they see it as just jumping a little tier. I think they see themselves moving down to mostly tier 1s.
And I think you said, Joe, the issue right now is that our water regulations don't permit a building like that to have more than one tier. We'd have to change the regulations.
That's correct.
Okay.
So I guess one question for the consultant that you're going to have look at this would be whether, given that it's one building, we don't have many, we have some condominiums that are townhouse style or not, as you just said, Tom, not a large structure like that. This is probably the only one? Is it the only one that we have?
No, 36 Central's condo, isn't it? Not?
Yeah, it's condo.
36 Central's condo.
Right,
And
that's
they have a
right,
master
that's
meter.
right.
I think we've just hit the 2.
So the question is, when we're only talking 2, is there some other compromise that we can consider that might address because it's an equity issue. I mean, they are paying a much, I think we all agree, they're paying a much higher rate than what they would if they did have the separate meters. And
This is a very healthy discussion, and I think we're not going to leave this meeting and say that, that's it. And I'm going to go back to my consultant. I think the consultant is going to be conducting a number of outreach, sessions to understand what we're considering, what we might do, and some back and forth, maybe multiple meetings, to get some guidance. What's the industry doing, what's the region doing, and what are our wishes? And then bottom line, what's the impact? How do we see the impact as we go into 15? So you'll have a vision prior to setting next year's rate.
I did speak with Kathy Dunphy today. I know that you had been on vacation. You were doing this research, looking at a lot of towns. I did talk with her about whether she, just as our MWRA representative on the advisory board, has had this issue ever come up before. And she said she had talked previously with Boston and I think Somerville and Brookline about it. And Boston had indicated that they have a lot of condominium buildings, but it's such a complicated issue that they haven't come up with a solution for it. So.
I believe that's to be correct.
Yeah.
Boston, John Sullivan actually responded to my question, and I believe he was one of the ones who said exactly that. They master meter, and that's it. Yeah, Boston Water and Sewer Commission did respond to this. Brookline, I think, might have as well.
That is correct. We build condominiums in Boston. We've requested single meters, and they just don't allow it.
Yeah.
1 meter, that's it.
Somerville did respond, Brookline did not respond. So my cross-section includes those Somerville and Boston answers.
So the takeaway, Joe, is you're going to have this consultant look at this issue and.
That's correct. It actually, as I get into my quarterly report, I'm going to get into
Okay.
the various initiatives that we have ongoing, which is going to be a little more detail on the water capital.
I guess to give 88 Wharf some encouragement, as I think we're all sympathetic to the issue and think it is probably, not probably, it is unfair, that we'd like to do something about it. Question is how and when.
Yes, yeah.
So we'll wait for the consultant?
Correct. And our consultant will be in at the next meeting to talk about the 14 rate setting.
Okay, thanks, John. And number 11 is a discussion on the Canton Inter-Municipal Agreement Abatement. I believe we have DPW Director Michael Trotter and the Town Council Lou Ross.
For third
And
chair.
Milton's Town Council John Flynn. If you could all come up to the table. Can you bring us up to speed, the public as well, where we are with the municipal agreement?
Sure.
Why Canton
Ever
gets...
so briefly, Milton and Canton have had an agreement by which Milton provides water to Canton customers, and Canton is billed at rates from Milton to them. That's been in place since 1953, and it remained in place up until 2008. In 2008, the agreement was modified. It was rewritten. A new agreement was issued, but for the most part, preserved nearly all of the provisions of the earlier agreement, with a few exceptions. And those exceptions were, rather than Milton charging Canton at the old MDC rate plus 10%, MDC was a precursor to the MWRA, they altered that that Milton would charge Canton at the rate that we charge our customers, as it may change from time to time.
And this was approved at town meeting.
That's correct. I believe it went through both town meetings. I know it went through our town meeting. I think it went through Canton's town meeting as well, and nonetheless jointly signed by both boards of selectmen. But it also, on the modified agreement in 2008, obligated Canton to do a couple of things. One was to physically disconnect interconnections from their system. gotta be careful, from their system, from their, to their system, from their system, but in those areas where Milton was feeding water through their system. Principally, that's the Green Street, Washington Street,
Royal Street.
which is in Blue Hill River Road, and Royal,
Not Roy.
Not Royal, it was allow Royal to continue to be fed. And the reason for that is there was some concern raised by Milton, aggressively,
We're losing water.
that we were losing water and then Canton was reaping the benefit of excess water that we weren't billing. And that's, no pun intended, that's water over the dam, under the bridge, and down the road. Mike Trotter and I work well together. I think, I recognize him as the gentleman he is, and I think he was the same with me. That animosity's gone. The last piece of this agreement was that Canton was to initiate a set of capital improvements on their end to make their system sufficient to be able to support those customers and to return those customers.
And where do those capital improvements?
They're ready to
stand?
go. They are ready to reconnect the system.
For about a year. Lou Ross, counsel for the town.
Gentlemen, if I could just get you to introduce yourself for the public, if you don't.
Sure. My name's Lou Ross. I'm here on behalf of Town of Canton as counsel on this matter. My colleague here is Mike Trotta, Superintendent for the Department of Public Works for Canton.
Welcome.
So the improvements are ready to go, but not in place yet, is that?
No, they're done. They've been ready to go for about a year.
Okay, and what's holding back on?
Us. This is where it gets complicated, and Tom, you may remember this as chair last year, when Canton.
Because of feeding our,
We have two high-pressure tanks, Chickatawpet 1 and Chickatawpet 2, about 1.3 million gallons of storage that are fed off of this piece of water main, and has been for 100 years, 90-some-odd years. At the same token, we also have long, in hydraulic terms, a long dead end where we have customers at the Canton line along Hillside Street, which abuts Canton at their Blue Hill River Road, but it's out near Houghton's Pond. We have several neighborhoods out there. And from a operational perspective, you certainly need to maintain your pressure, you need to maintain your storage volume, and the tanks are essential for that. But you also need to maintain freshness of water and circulation of water, and you do that through looping. So if Canton were to make good on the agreement in '08 and to do what Mike wanted to do a year ago, just about a year ago, maybe even
Yes.
earlier, just almost
No, it's
exactly.
about this time
Just
last
about.
year. Yep.
When Mike called me up and I said, what are you doing? They were ready to reconnect and shut the valves down at the Milton line, which ostensibly would have put my two Chickatawpet tanks out of commission and would have created this long dead end affecting water quality to those individual homes. So as like I said, we get along well. I said to Mike, how much time can you buy on this? I was more concerned with the operational water quality issues from our system more than I was the financial piece of it. So I think what's before us this evening, and you asked me to bring you up to speed on the agreement, is that's the change in the agreement. What I believe Canton is asking, and I'm sure they're going to clarify in a moment, is that they want to look at the fee structure that was previously agreed to in '08 and revisit that, ask you people to revisit the fee structure, one. And I think two is to have us reach an agreement on a timetable of when it is we can assure them that we're satisfied with our system's abilities or inabilities and allow them to reconnect. I think that's really the two things that they're
Okay,
looking to.
answer the second question first, because I think that's the more important one.
The second question first is,
When are we going to?
it's that same master plan. The master plan is going to look at fire flows, it's going to look at our ISO requirements, actually through court team. Dennis has been kept apprised of these developments. Your board approved that contract about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So that project is actually going to go. We'll have a pretty good handle on that answer, I'd say certainly within 6 months. We may have the more general answer of, do we need tanks or not, sooner. The more complicated issue is, you're still going to have a dead-end line. How do you keep those houses fresh?
And
That one's gets-
which houses are we talking about? Milton houses?
They're all Milton houses up by
Blue Hill
Houghton's
River
Pond.
and, those
Names
roads.
escape me. Eileen, Adrian.
Yeah, those little streets off of Blue
Blue Hill
Hill.
River Road.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, in Adrian, Silverbrook, that's what I missed, Silverbrook. 30, 40 residents, 30, 40 households out there that would be
So
at the
are we
very
talking
end.
substantial cost to the town of Milton, I guess?
Hmm?
Are we talking substantial cost to the town of Milton to do this, or?
Well, I guess what I want to say is that our infrastructure over the past century has been built upon the ability to feed water up to that corner of town through, it was our water through their pipes. Is that accurate? Our water through your pipes through that whole time.
Fair enough.
And by virtue of them cutting it off, we would have to, at the very least, find a way to connect it. We could either go up and over the mountain, Big Blue, not feasible, or we could work out a deal that, and again, I don't know if this is the answer, that if we did need the tanks and we did need the circulation issue resolved, we could have to run our own water main down 138 in their town, just as a transmission main, down, down 138 and then down Blue Hill River Road to reconnect to our main. Several $1 million.
Ouch.
Which
you just did.
Which we just spent almost $3 million to get our infrastructure in place so that we could meet Milton's request to sort of take our customers back. So Canton's done the same thing.
And obviously, and pardon the pun, but since you spent $3 million, you don't want to just flush it down the toilet.
Exactly. So that's why we're here tonight to ask the Board of Selectmen from Milton to give us some consideration on our bill and our bill going forward, as we're willing to work with you people to give you extra time to help solve or come up with a reasonable solution for all of us. I think that the discussion started in 2007, and it was between 2007 2008 where the boards and the two town managers worked out the agreement. And at that time, the 2010 timeframe, plus or minus, was felt agreeable to us because we thought we'd be in place within that time to assume those customers back. In fact, the project took us a little bit longer. We completed it last summer. We were in a position to reconnect and assume those customers back. So because we did our work and we agreed for that change in billing costs. That's why we're here tonight saying, would you consider an abatement on last year, and would you consider to renegotiate that rate to more reflect what it was in the original agreement from 1953, which I think was the MWR rate plus 10%.
Joe, how much, so we're charging the commercial rate, is it, or the
Tier
wholesale
4.
rate?
We're tier 4.
Canton's customers are Canton's customers.
So we're charging
Canton's
retail
meters.
rate.
So Canton goes out and reads all of their meters quarterly, and every quarter,
Yes.
just Monday,
Yes.
we got their letter that says, here it is for the quarter, and they give me the sum total of all their customers. So Canton as a entity is 88 Wharf Street. They're a condo. I get a total bill of a sum total of all of their readings, which we bill at the tier, which is all at the highest tier. So that's what they get billed at.
I guess my question is, in 1953, was it wholesale plus 10%?
Yes.
Yes.
And today it's just retail?
Retail. It's our retail rate.
What's the difference between wholesale plus 10% from retail?
It's about, by our calculations, it's about $83,000.
A year.
83,000 a year.
Yeah, 'cause it's just really the MWRA charge plus 10%, basically.
Yes.
Right.
Actually, Jim, your finance
Yeah,
director,
I
he
think
provided
that's-
us, he provided
I
us some
think that's
analysis,
it
but
right there.
I didn't have the ability
You have this
to
spreadsheet.
garner where his numbers came from, so I wasn't able to verify it, so I'm
That's
taking-
why I'm
taking them at
saying
face value.
by our numbers, which I don't think anybody's checked.
Oh, yeah, 81. So,
I don't know if it's,
Is this water and sewer or just water?
Just
Just
water.
Just water, okay.
I mean, just by comparison, in FY '13, the rates that we haven't set our rates yet. Are these your current rates for '13? Have you set your '14 rates yet?
Yes.
These are probably your '13 rates.
If you're going to ask me, I won't be able to tell you yes or no.
So Canton charges their customers at Tier 1, $3.80. We charge $4.68.
Okay, so if we were to build these gallons, and I know we don't use gallons, but can you run a Tier 1 rate on that amount of usage and see what?
They don't get it all tier, like any large customer, the first 600 cubic feet,
Understand,
which
yeah,
is
right.
negligible in the
Yeah,
big
it's
picture.
graduated, yeah. Mhm.
So they do get each of the tiers until they exceed threshold, and their number's so
But
high.
let's say we took that 14 million gallons and just build it at Tier 1, because most likely, most of the users are Tier 1. I'm just curious as to...
Well, I wouldn't say that.
No.
Yeah, you're right.
I would not
necessarily.
recommend.
Oh, no,
that
they
you
have
do
some
that.
seriously big houses with big irrigation systems.
Yeah,
and they
that's
have
true.
some
We got
nice
big Green
industry.
Street and, yeah.
They have big blue ski
You
area
have the
making
ski
snow.
area?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, I think they got,
There are some Tier 4 users in there. Okay.
There is approximately 55 Canton customers on this bill, of which Meditech and Blue Hills make up 60%. On the other larger users, there's the gas station at the corner, there's the Dunkin' Donuts, there's Suffolk Grill, there's the church. So those 10 customers that are on Washington Street make up about 70% of the bill.
Usage, right?
they're
Yeah.
probably all your top tier customers.
Yes.
I would-
Okay.
That's just a general observation I have. I mean, your consumption reports would prove that out in a minute. We could get it if that's the question being asked.
So it probably wouldn't help you then if you gave us the information by meter and we billed you that way, it still would probably be a fairly high bill because there are a lot of under our system, a lot of those would be Tier 4 users.
The bill would be less,
Right, because there certainly are some Tier
Yes.
1 users in there.
yes.
There's 100 ways to skin this cat.
Yes.
And we actually, I apologize, because I said they were looking to address the billing structure moving forward. I neglected to say that you're also looking to address.
Well, I
Some
guess
abatement
there's a
going
couple
back.
of issues
That's
here.
fine.
Number one is, if we're to change this agreement, that means going back to town meeting to change it. If we're to redefine what retail means, that probably doesn't, because I'm sure town meeting didn't say what retail
I believe
was.
we were given the power to change this. The Board of Selectmen, we can change it. Is that correct, John?
Yes.
Yes.
I think that 2008 vote allows you to amend the agreement going forward, not just...
Oh, does it? Okay,
Yes.
okay, all right,
There's an email to that effect, though.
okay, okay.
Your recommendation, Joe?
I don't think it's as simple as MWRA plus some arbitrary administrative percentage. I think it's more complicated. The water that we're selling to them is running through our meter, so it has an effect of increasing our flow share. So there's a penalty involved with our increased flow share, as we talked about earlier, as we measure to others. So there's some value. I don't know what that value is. There is some value there. There's some administrative value as well. There's also some risk value that if any of our customers in town here don't pay their bill, we lien their property. It goes to real estate, and we get our money. If Canton doesn't pay,
We have no
we
way to
can't
do it.
lien it. You know,
Right.
it's a leap of faith. It's good faith, and it's good neighborly trust but there's something that needs to be leveraged as far as that
We can't annex Washington Street into the town of Milton.
not sure I want it. Only because of the traffic.
I can't speak for my board, but I don't know if I would oppose it.
Can I ask, where does the water come from, the Blue Hills ski area?
It comes from Canton right now. Well, it's,
Your meter,
Yes.
your main, my water, our water.
Down in
We need to be
Washington.
possessive of our
Yeah.
water.
Okay.
So, without talking specific, I think we need to get a better arms around the general situation.
We're not going to resolve this
We,
tonight.
we walked away from our last meeting with Mike, and we thought that at least in the short term, there's a logical way we could probably put some of his customers back online without compromising this ability to loop. It
That would be-
doesn't address those large consumers we
No.
just talked about, but it does put, it probably puts 30 or 40
About-
residential
I
customers.
could probably get about 30% of my customers, well, about 30% of the bill with those customers.
Bring them back online.
Yes.
So there's something we could allow them to do to
That'd be
reconnect a
help.
piece of their system, to at least put some of the system to more full use. I mean, I know the perception is their capital upgrades are being wasted, but you readily admit that you've got some great
Well,
benefits.
It's, just to make that a little bit clearer, is that we were planning to replace our line in Elm Street, which is on the other side of 128. I'm old, so it's 128 to me. And as we were making that plan, the issue was raised from Milton about the unaccounted water and the possibility that Canton was affecting that. What could we do to lessen that problem? And I said, well, we already are planning this much. If I add another, I think it was 15 to 2,000 feet of pipe, I cross under 128, I can get my pressure, that's essentially the same Milton pressure, over to that section. So that's what we did. We added on to this already planned project. So it wasn't that the whole infrastructure project was solely to meet Milton request or try to work out something. It was,
help the pressure as
we
well.
had already started, we could up pressure by adding on to the project, which is what we did. Because essentially, that's why we were relying on Milton, because this section of Canton was that much higher that we couldn't get our pressure over there to that, especially the top of the houses, those little higher houses that are right off of 138.
So, Mr. Chairman, you asked the question, what was my recommendation? My recommendation is that you give the authority for the town administrator and I to work with our counterparts in Canton to work out the details of this. Now that I'm hearing the town meeting is not an artificial horizon that's looming, we have some time to do this right, but not have to wait all the way until next
Reasonable.
spring. To allow us to work out that and then report back to you what our ultimate recommendation is. Right now, it's all over the place.
I think that's reasonable.
However, with respect to the water and sewer fiscal 13 bill, the Board of Selectmen are the water commissioners, and they are the only ones that have the right to abate a bill. So they would have to take that vote on the fiscal year 13 water and sewer bill.
Yeah, and I think it's fair that we probably have enough information, and Mike, this is where he's not going to like me anymore.
That is what-
Every year, we bill them quarterly. They tell us what they've sold, and we issue a bill, and they pay it, and it's been faithful. They paid their first bill of FY '13 sometime last August. We've issued repeated bills, and they've all gone unpaid, so the first we've heard of this was maybe 6 weeks ago. Could be 2 months ago. But, they're now asking, and I understand why, but they're asking for some forgiveness for prior billings, which is going to result in right now it's $100,800, and you're saying you're looking for maybe something of $83,000 back.
I think the request in the town administrators was
50% of what's owed, so
Yeah.
Half of the 50.
$40,900.
$26.
And if you give us the abatement, we're ready to send the check tomorrow.
Give you the abatement of
If you're ready to move on the abatement, we're ready to send the check, as I know.
for 40,000.
Yes, the proposal is 50% of the fiscal year 2013 charges, for going back just to last year. That's what's being proposed. That's what the town of Canton is asking that you consider.
But at least we have some dialogue now. We can discuss it.
I think we should take it under advisement. We can discuss it with our town council.
Absolutely. I think so,
If
yeah.
Mr. Lynch is needed, and then respond
And then respond
to
back.
Canton's request.
Yeah, because the obvious issue is precedent setting also in terms of abating a bill. you know, from an agreement that was signed by both parties, and, you know, we certainly don't want other customers coming back saying, well, you abated them, why can't you abate us? So,
I've only been here 4 years, but Mr. Moran before me was here a lot longer than that. I've been told, quote unquote, we have never abated a water or sewer account
right.
in recent history.
We've had some requests.
Decades.
I know we've had some requests. So, you know, that's the precedent-setting part of it that we're concerned about, obviously.
These are fairly special circumstances, I believe, though. And I would also ask that when you consider the rate going forward, that you strongly consider the MWRA rate, where the retail rate, whatever tier you might consider, is town meeting of the town of Milton can affect that. So it's difficult for us to forecast that, and if we want to move this forward quickly, I think that would be the way to do it.
You lost me on that one.
To go back to the wholesale plus 10% or something?
Yeah, so to go back to how it was done in the prior agreement before 2008, the same administration, same procedures, everything, rather than having to go with a retail rate or a tier 1, tier 2, whatever rate that you wish to consider, the town's going to agree on, where that tier is going to be, need to be approved by town meeting.
Joe, just remind me one more time, what was the difference between wholesale plus 10% and retail, approximately?
I don't have that answer. I'm sorry.
Somebody answered it already.
Yeah, according to my financial director on that whole $120,000
He thought it was around
bill,
83.
it's about $80,000 according to him.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
Between the current charges and
Yes.
and the
That
MWR rate and 10%, so.
Okay. So again, obviously, for the public, that 80,000 has to be passed on to somebody.
That's
It was
right.
in prior fiscal year, so it's going to show up as a revenue shortfall. It already has in
Right.
12.
Right, yeah, there's nothing we can do about that.
This was a Milton customer, they'd be on a list to go to lien in November. We would be putting it on their real estate and collecting it through the real estate tax, but we don't have that luxury.
Right? Everybody good?
Thank you.
So we'll take it under advisement.
Yep.
Back to you. Thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Am I free to talk with John, or is it all going to be between towns?
Public meeting, so,
No.
but, yeah, you can certainly address the question to him, I guess.
Are you talking about moving
No,
forward?
he wants going forward, he wants to be able,
A
yes.
timeline to move forward, how separate tracks between
Yes.
John and I am?
According to John, it's okay.
Okay.
I apologize, I said that Anne Marie and I should deal with our counterparts, but obviously council probably should be involved in those discussions.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, good to see you guys.
Yep.
Fine.
Nice to meet you.
And you stay right there, Joe, because we're going to have the approval on a Bobcat excavator purchase. We have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation of the Public Works Director to purchase of a mini excavator from Bobcat of Boston in the amount of $68,600.
Second.
Motion being seconded. Any discussion? Can you tell us, Joe, what this is for?
Certainly. We've had used a rubber tire backhoe, large 3 cubic yard, excuse me, 3/4 cubic yard bucket for most of the work in the past. And what we find is that's wonderful in the street, but the trend nowadays is to use the small compact excavators in your street work, but it also gives you the ability to do your off-roadway work.
Okay.
It allows us to get into easements, get into backyards, it allows us to do area at the cross-country water feeds and sewer mains in the woods.
What do you presently use?
We're using a John Deere 710, I believe.
Are you going to sell that, or you?
No, we're going to continue
That
to
as well.
use that one. This one actually replaces the old Case 680. This one replaces the Case 680.
Any further questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
Number 13, we're going to have discussion on Chapter 90 roadway improvements.
Okay, and I'll leave the discussion on this.
Tom is going to lead us on this one.
I do have some handouts, so let's see. How many of these we got? These all, something missing here. These are all assumption ones. They were okay, I'll get started anyways. I've been having discussions with Anne Marie and Joe Lynch. Obviously, we all know the roads are in deplorable condition.
Deplorable.
And they're not getting any better, they're getting worse. Right now, we throw, Joe, about 700,000, give or take?
Round numbers, and it fluctuates every year, but
Yeah,
sure.
but somewhere in the order of 700,000 a year. That gets us a half dozen roads, maybe, in a year. At the rate we're going, the roads are deteriorating, I think, faster than we're fixing them. And it just, we get more and more complaints. Thinking outside the box, one of those things you wake up in the middle of the night and light dawns in Marblehead. I said, what else can we do? And one possibility is to try and leverage our Chapter 90 dollars. And by leveraging, I mean, what if we were to go out and do a bond issue? I'll throw $8 million as a round number, which is probably about, at the rate we're spending, about 11, 12 years worth of roadway improvements that would be done in 1 year, or maybe 2 years, or 3 years, depending on how long it takes to physically accomplish that. Use the Chapter 90 money, put it in a sinking fund, let that money garner interest. Because of the way bonding works, you'll do the work, you'll ban it, you'll bond it. It's at least a year from the point that the money actually gets expended till you start making physically a bond payment. The first one's going to be interest only. So there's a time lag. If you were to put your Chapter 90 money starting, say, in FY14, and this is what these spreadsheets will show, and Chapter 90 money is going up, at least this year. We know...
Actually went down.
Well, we think the supplemental...
Depending what happens.
They did override the veto on the highway bill. So because of that, I believe that... Yeah. So this is... Okay. So the one you're looking at right now, and I did two of these. One's at...
Assumption.
One's assuming we're going to bond $8 million. Assumption one is we're going to do the whole $8 million in expenditures in 1 year. If we can do this agreement where we can use the Chapter 90 money, there's some question whether you can do that or not, but if the state will allow us to, we're probably going to get a better rate on our bond because it has a fixed source of revenue to repay it. So in terms of the bond rating you might get on that thing, it might be higher than just our basic general obligation bond. That we'll be putting that in a sinking fund. I'm assuming 2%. The maximum amount of time we can bond road improvements is 15 years. So what I've done here is I've just picked an arbitrary, let's say we do have $900,000 in Chapter 90 money and we dump it in, or some amount of Chapter 90 money and some source from someplace else. But we dump, starting in 2014, $900,000. That earns 1.5% a year. Just it's going to get invested. And the third column shows the sinking fund balance. So you put in $900,000 in FY14, you get a little bit of interest on it. So it accumulates to $913,500. Then you're going to make a bond payment. You're going to get a little more interest. So that kind of, so you can see by on $900,000, by year 2023, you've basically put enough money into that sinking fund to pay your bond off. And so that basically means in year 2024, you can start, or even 2023, you can start your next round of bonding and improvements, just doing the same cycle again. So that's the concept, that's the idea. And basically at 2%, you'd be looking at a, if we did it all in 1 year, you'd be looking at a total interest cost of $1.2 million, almost $1.3 million. Because you're making interest on the sinking fund, the net interest cost comes down to about $1,060,000, net of the interest that you made on.
So is the sinking fund, is that what you call the Chapter 90 funds that we get?
Yeah, basically all the sinking fund is a dedicated fund to pay off. We'll probably use the word special fund, but in private business it'd be called a sinking fund.
And Tom, as the economy gets better, would this increase the Chapter 90 funding?
You never know. I mean, Joe can probably speak. I mean, we've had Chapter 90 money for quite a while now.
I'd say
it's
it's
increased
actually,
every year.
I'd say it's actually the opposite, that the increases have been commensurate with the fail economy and the stimulus, and trying to pump money back into the economy by promoting construction.
Right.
So I think you've actually seen recently some increases, but and I didn't bring that kind of data with me, but I actually have pretty historical data of what Milton has gotten over the past 10 years, and you can see it's all over the place.
But our argument, and I suspect, and I need, that's what I need you and Anne Marie to do is the research on how to accomplish this, because I suspect right now, and I can tell you that there is some basis for this in terms of federal funds. Most of my experience is in housing, in federal low-income housing. And federal low-income housing, they get HUD grants to repair and modernize their housing stock. Typically, they'll get, a typical housing authority might get $700,000, $800,000 a year. What they find is their housing stock is deteriorating quicker than they're pumping the money back in. HUD has allowed them to take, I think it's 30 years worth of projected capital fund, they call them capital fund grants, and specifically earmark it to a bond. So it's based on that model. And those are cost reimbursable grants from the feds. But they are earmarking it to debt service. So
from year 24 to actually 25 to 29, what happens to the money then?
Well, it's built up to, based upon this model, it's built up to about $3 million, and it slowly gets used to pay down the rest of the bonds through 2029. If you look at the second page, no different than the first page, other than the second page says, well, what happens if we do $4 million in FY14 and $4 million in FY15, which is maybe more of what might happen. Again, because of the lag in the timing of the money, and if you started funding this fund in FY14, you'd actually pay off the bonds a little quicker from the sinking fund. If you'll notice, they're still 2024 when they get paid off, but the final payment is down from $60,000 to $25,000. Your net interest cost is down from $1,060,000 to $1,025,000. And then the third one is saying, well, what if we do it over 3 years, $2.6 million a year for 3 years, and again, even a little more savings, then you do pay off the full thing in 2023. So, the longer you extend it out, only because you've got money going in here that's not getting spent out in the sinking fund is quick. You earn a little more money on it, and you're able to...
Joe, how would that affect your water and sewer upgrades? Because obviously that would need to be done before you do any road, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to be a naysayer, because I think, first of all, I'm tickled pink because I've been trying to profess the degradation of roadway and the funding gap between Chapter 90 and our ability to meet our obligations is widening and widening, and I've been professing that for my entire career. So I really appreciate Tom's effort of paying attention and listening and coming up with some great ideas. I think you're absolutely correct that when we rebuild a roadway, we concern ourselves with the underground infrastructure first. We want to go in and we want to build. Part of it is our pavement management system, and part of it is our roadway. In the perfect storm is when you rebuild the worst roadway that has the worst water main beneath it, because you get the most value. So we would have to get a careful match of what projects those were that could do that. Or the opposite, is that we're repaving roadways that have perfectly good water mains under it, and we don't, bad conditioned roadways that have perfectly good water mains under them. we could move forward without having much of an impact on water. But those are few and far between. I hate to say it, and I keep going back to this water capital plan. This is a revisitation of our 10-year plan that we are literally in the 8th year on. We've completed all of our projects on the prior 10-year plan. Reason why we're embarking is for us to forecast what those next water mains are that we should be working on. I don't have that answer yet. We won't have it for about 6 months.
Right. And that money, some of that money is coming out of MWA in the form of free loans?
Some of it's funded through our local pipeline assistance grant program, and some of it's being funded through our rates, because we have capital line in our rate structure as well.
Right.
Tom, how?
So I guess we'd need an estimate on the cost of doing that, and again, the cost of bonding that.
Right now, just to put it on balanced ground here, is the current available water funds through the MWA and our capital is supporting the $700,000 of roadway construction every year. So if we're looking to do $8 million, we would theoretically, over the next 2 or 3 years, depending if you're phasing, you would have to increase, all things being equal, you'd have to increase your water and sewer infrastructure.
Understand.
Commensurately.
Yeah, but so commensurately, what is that number?
We don't know that number yet.
Yeah.
It's literally, it's the next wave of the master plan coming out that's going to give us that answer.
Okay. So
It'll hold true for the next 10 years.
Yeah, so I think we have to work on that and get a number on that. Find out if this is feasible in terms of what will we have to do to accomplish using Chapter 90 money as. And it's not like other towns haven't, I don't know that any town has come up with this model, but certainly other towns, and Braintree and I guess Arlington are two that have pumped massive amounts of dollars into their roadway improvements. And
Yeah,
maybe they're not doing the water and sewer part of it, I don't know.
I think they are. I don't know about Braintree. I think Arlington was looking at the total picture. And my understanding, I hate to say I don't have a confirmation back from Arlington, but I've been involved in their discussions because they did it about 7 or 8 years ago, and it was very intriguing when they did it. I don't think they were using the Chapter 90 funding to pay their debt service. I think they simply put it in their capital plan and floated a bond for that purpose, and to do it all, and they're paying it through their general fund revenue. That's not to say you can't do it. I'm just saying that I don't recall that that's what Arlington did, and I don't know what Braintree did. It's certainly worth asking the question 1,000 times until someone finally says yes and gives it to you in writing. But where I've been thus far is looking at the Chapter 90 regulations for eligible projects. First of all, they are all reimbursable, if you will.
Right.
So you'd actually have to incur an eligible expense, apply for reimbursement, which they pay back, as opposed to giving money up front.
I'm saying
we'd have to get the money up front.
You've incurred $8 million worth of actual refundable, reimbursable expenses, just in, the problem.
Right, but we don't have that money, available. So we'd have to get them to concede
that's the case.
that we're obligating future funds.
Right.
And then find a way to structure that to allow that to happen.
And like I said, there is some precedent for that model with HUD. Granted, it's federal, not state, but
there's, it may make perfect business sense. The people that I spoke with at state aid office at district level, District 6, have never heard of it, and their gut feeling was you can't do it. You can't use the money to pay debt service. However, you might want to ask, who I asked was Matt Belmonte, who was their chief budget director for the state aid program up at DOT, and he said the same thing. And I said, well, I'm told that perhaps this was done with home rule petition, there might be an opportunity, so you might want to talk to your local delegation. I thought, not that we've done this before, but that's been done elsewhere. So I actually had an opportunity to speak with Brian Joyce about a completely unrelated matter yesterday, but as conversations with Brian can go, Senator Joyce can go, is they lead in different directions, and mine led to, hey, isn't Braintree in your district? Isn't Arlington in your district? And they are. Mm-hmm. Did they? And he said, not that he recalls, that they filed home rule, and if they did, he would have recalled. But he was going to check that he actually had he got his aide on the phone as well, as he said, never mind my district. I'm going to ask her to research, was the home rule elsewhere, anywhere in the state where they've done this, if we can do it.
Right.
So I don't have that answer yet.
Too is you put $8 million back into the local economy, all at once.
The other piece of this that jumps out at me that we'd have to understand is we're obligating future year funds, and let's say it stays consistent around that $700,000 a year.
Yep.
So we're obligating, actually, I think you're showing 900,000
Right.
syncing fund.
So we
Say
need-
it's 900,000 a year. Once you've completed the project, whether it's year one or 2-year or a 3-year project, once you completed that project, for the balance of till 2029, when you're paying it off, actually until we use that last sinking fund contribution in 2013, we would be, unless we come up with other local funding, we would be spending $0 on any roadway construction for a 5-year, 6-year, 7-year period.
Right, but you would have already done.
But you would have already done a
10
bunch.
Yeah, you would have done more than that.
I know that answer, but the public who's used to construction and disruption and dust and noise and construction progressing year to year
Right.
will grow impatient, I think, after several years. So I think we'd have to find a way to really publicize the value of that.
Yeah, I mean, it addresses the worst roads that would be done in the next 10 years.
In what it really,
Probably.
and from the advantage is we've used, this isn't arbitrary, I see you've built this off probably the model for the pavement management program. We probably have $28 million in forecasted need of all of our roadway structure. I mean, we could also, pick off those high priority ones that don't have water mains, and we probably could show some real value. And more importantly, when you do those in early years,
Yep.
you're foregoing further deterioration, which escalates costs. So there's
Right.
actually some cost containment advantages.
Exactly.
So it's intriguing. I mean, let's find every way we can do it and to minimize, the disruption and dot every I and cross every T. But right now, I think we've got a lot of work to bring this forward. I don't know what the timetable is to do that.
Well, I mean, it'd be nice if we could do it sooner rather than later, but, yeah, with all the other obstacles, it may have to wait till the spring, but.
Springtime meeting?
Yeah.
I think that's a reasonable forecast, to take this effort and take this time to get those answers sorted out.
I mean,
But I think
the other thing you got to be concerned with too is right now, it's kind of it's an optimal time because of debt is cheap right now, and it's not always going to be cheap. It's going to obviously get more
Didn't
expensive.
something just happen last week with municipal bond rates, didn't they?
Yeah, they probably
Go
crept
point?
up a little bit, but
I think they went up
Tom, is that a fixed rate, a fixed interest rate?
usually.
all bonds would be fixed interest rates.
They're
yeah.
fixed?
Yeah. Yeah, generally speaking.
Can
And
you-
like I said, if you had a guaranteed source and a sinking fund, you're probably going to get a better rate on that bond than just as a general obligation bond. So,
Just a high level of confidence on the ability to pay it.
hey, right, exactly.
So just to recap, because I'm not the finance guy, you are. So we'd be borrowing $8 million
Mhm.
and having Chapter 90 funds pay for it.
That's right. Plain and simple, yeah, that's basically it.
If it's possible to
If it's
do.
possible.
If it's possible, yeah.
So the question is not if, but how is it possible? Let's figure out a way.
What would be the, I mean, I understand the construction part of it, but the obstacle is, can you do it, is it?
Well, the obstacle is because Chapter 90 money is a cost reimbursable grant, you can't get the Chapter 90 money until you've spent the money on an eligible expenditure.
Gotcha.
Is debt service an eligible expenditure? Clearly, the underlying costs are eligible, but they're in a year that you didn't have the grant either, so it's a different grant year. And
I think that's the ultimate threshold that has to be cleared first, is can you? And
Yep.
I think beyond that is the
One-
strategy piece of it.
Yes, exactly. I mean, this is just seat of the pants, throwing numbers out. We probably have to refine it more, but,
It's probably worth presenting to the capital committee as well.
yeah, I think so.
Actually, we had a far less detail, but a very similar conversation in the past 2 years at the capital committee level, when we talked about that. More generally, 2 years ago, very great detail about the bridging the gap and the necessity of why they threw $1 million at Central
Right.
Avenue to get the thing off the dime. And in prior, you gave us $300,000 to help bridge the gap. And that
Right.
gap is about $1.2 million a year, short of what Chapter 90 provides versus need.
And the problem is, just out of general obligation, we wouldn't get any other capital
No other
projects
projects done.
if we just take it out of the general fund. So that's the dilemma.
Good.
Okay.
Good work, Tom.
Tom?
Tommy, he just said I only printed, I thought he printed them all, but I only printed one, so I'll make that available. That's just off the Mass DOT state aid,
Okay.
Chapter 90 program details of, that's just the outlines of what is allowed for
Eligible, yeah.
reimbursement.
Okay.
Okay, moving right ahead to the GIS work order tracking contract, number 14 on the agenda. We have a
I'm
motion.
happy to read the motion, but we don't have any backup materials. Maybe we could have Joe just explain this briefly to us.
Want to make the motion and we can?
Yeah, let's make the motion first. yeah.
All right, so I'll move to approve a contract between the town and the People's GIS of Woburn for a contract, state contract, ITS 43, number VC 000410014, for the purchase of a software package that will integrate the town's GIS system for tracking work orders in an amount not to exceed $35,200, and to authorize the town administrator to sign all pertinent paperwork on behalf of the board.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion.
Sure, and I'll give you some more information, I apologize. Go ahead. The letter, but not the backup on it, is what I think Katie's concerned. What are we spending $35,000 on, more than the letter, right? And I apologize, because as the new person on the block, I should have apprised you of this, new selectman, not up to speed on all of the issues that are facing us. But this is actually a request that's come through the Capital Planning Committee 3 years in a row. Was beat up pretty hard the first year, was vetted pretty well the second year, but funding limitations didn't move it. And then the third year, this year, it was actually approved for funding, and town meeting approved it. And during that process, the people from People's GIS, the representatives came in and presented and gathered information to make certain we were creating an open architecture that all the departments could use, starting out as a pilot, if you will, in Public Works. They came in and they presented actually at core team. Tom, you were the chairman at the time.
Yeah.
You may have sat in on that meeting when they came in and they did the presentation. What it simply
I
is.
remember seeing it at the municipal.
Okay.
Had done-
MMA.
remember
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
The MMA.
this is a different vendor, but the same basic software, yes.
Basics, yeah.
So what it really boils down to is, right now, a citizen calls and makes a request. Any department, but like I said, we're starting in Public Works. They make a request, and that person who takes the message, writes it down, has to write up a work order, which is on an access database, which we've exceeded the limits on. It gets printed out, copied to the supervisor and to the foreman, gets answered back, comes back, and that's the end of it. People's GIS is web-based, where anybody at home, anybody from the mobile device, anybody who takes the call can simply open it up and take the service request. The service request starts as a request, which requires the supervisor or the foreman to go out and assess it, and once it's assessed, it becomes a work order. The customer can track this thing from the point of service request right through until it's completed. He can see how it's progressing or how it's not progressing. More importantly, it works within the database, so we can then be able to determine how frequently we have tree problems, how frequently we have pothole problems, what streets, and that all integrates back to our GIS mapped database, G being the graphical piece, IS being information systems. So we can actually, not actually, the intent is that it integrates with our water capital plan, our pavement management system, our sign retroreflectivity program. As we do work, all of those databases get updated simultaneously, one stop, one write, if you will. So we've been talking with these folks for several years. We first got the IT people here in town involved to make sure that we didn't have system limitations or security protocol to allow people to get in. And what we did is we established that this has to be a cloud-based system where we're able to get it, and how it literally functions is, the reason why I carry this monstrosity is this is the smallest tablet, the largest phone, if you will, in one. Person makes a service request from their iPhone. It comes in the form of an email. It comes to me, and I read the service request, and it is Fallen Branch, such and such a street. I accept it as a service request and make it a work order. It immediately goes to my tree foreman, whose comparable device shows up on his map. It comes up as a warning. If he's in the area, he can address it. He can go out and fix it. He can close it out, and that person gets an email. And that's what this does for $35,200. More importantly, outside of the Public Works realm, we had vast other departments, police, fire, Board of Health, Council on Aging. Sky's the limit for how they can all do certain things that they do on a recurring basis and keep track. Everybody keeps separate databases, keeps track of the things they do. This simply provides that module being added in.
So was this put out to bid, and this is the low bidder?
State contract.
Okay.
So we did not put out to bid, we used the state vendor.
I see, okay.
Yeah, one other interesting, there were several other interesting uses of it, but one was Council on Aging, for example, or just the elderly population. You can actually map where your elderly population is through the GIS system. You can actually map people on life support, people on oxygen, people on, and then say you have a power outage in the town. You immediately know exactly where the people on oxygen are, or where the people on that could be in critical need are, and can send an ambulance out there, or fire out there, or whatever out there.
And each department has the ability to put security levels in as they see fit, so they're not sharing vulnerable or sensitive information across open architecture.
HIPAA stuff in, yeah.
Yeah, so if the Council on Aging's mission is to know who has what ailment in what area and what their vulnerability is, fire department simply needs to know that a person with an issue lives at a certain address. They don't need to know the specifics unless it's something the Council on Aging thinks they should have. So there's those security protocols that are built in as well.
So multiple departments will be using this?
Eventually, this total cost starts out, and quite frankly, it can be overwhelming to get everybody involved. So Public Works took this on as themselves to start to use this as a beta to get us up and running. And literally, Mike Blanchard in the Board of Health, he literally wants to jump on right behind us and be able to do his stuff. So I think they're quite capable of doing that. That was the feel I was getting when we sat here with the various department heads, a core team, and
Yep.
I mean, everybody was excited about it.
And the public can log on as well, right?
The intent is that they can log in. They don't have to. The elderly population or those who don't have computer access,
Right.
they don't have to. They can still make the phone call.
Yep.
And the person who takes that phone call, how many calls do you get that surely should be at Public Works? You can open that work order. And that's the intent of it, is we don't need to bounce people around to various extensions. Whoever takes the call can take the order and assign it.
But for example, from your iPhone or whatever, you could have checked to see if NSTAR had that permit on that street down on Milton Hill. Would that be correct? All permits will be on there as well?
The answer is yes. The answer is yes. It's far, far more than a permit software tracking.
Oh, I understand that, yeah.
And actually, that's a very important question, because I think what you may have looked at MMA conference back in January was actually a permit software tracking program that does other things. This is the opposite. This is a work order tracking that also has the ability to do permits. And Joe Prondak actually asked that question. Not so much that we would use it for doing permits, but Joe's permit software that he already owns integrates into this. So that's a long answer to the very short question
Okay,
you
thank
asked.
you.
I'm sorry.
Any more discussion? You all set? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Thank
Go right into your Public Works Quality Report, Joe.
I'll be brief.
Please.
Already talked about
Yeah,
everything.
I apologize, yeah. I just have some bullets, and I'm going to just try to blast right through them. Water main replacement program is ongoing right now, and they broke this out into our major work areas, so water first. Central Avenue, Spafford, Hoy, and Murray, that contract's been awarded. You guys have authorized that. Construction's about to start Monday. They're going to be starting on Central Avenue in support of, get the water done first for next year. Water distribution system master plan update, it's a 10-year update. It's going to look at a hydraulic stuff. It's going to look at our fire flows, hydraulic capacity, system looping, the water redundancy, and the storage tanks, things we talked about earlier. It's also going to look at operational efficiency. What ought to we be doing on a regular basis operationally to meet American Water Works standards? It's going to look at our financial analysis and our rate structure. It's going to specifically look at metering and data collection. It's going to look at the analysis of our rate structure, tiers or not, multiple unit facilities, and irrigation versus domestic use implications that we might consider changing. Sewer, the vast majority of the work we do every year is inflow and infiltration. We explore and analyze a certain piece of those underground soil pipes this year. That becomes next year's project. With that in sight, we are implementing year 9's evaluation. It's been a program that's been ongoing for the past 8 years. This is year 9 for evaluation. At the same time, you just authorized a few weeks ago the contract for our sewer rehabilitation, II rehabilitation. That's year 8 rehabilitation, and that's ongoing. We're also looking at establishing an inflow targeted pilot program, meaning that the infiltration, that water that leaks into the pipe, groundwater that leaks into the sewer that we're paying for, but there are other types of inflow. People's condensate from air conditioning systems could find their way into the sewer, shouldn't be there. Some pumps at houses, floor drains in houses, permanent drains and roof drains, as well as some of our own catch basins may tie into sewer. So an inflow, and that's actually more bang for the buck. But they're also highly controversial because quite frankly, we know we're going to find an awful lot of illegal sump pump connections in our sewer system. But we want to start on a targeted pilot system where we find that our sewer is being most overburdened first, and let's see what we get. Roadway reconstruction, we're looking to do some trench restoration work on a small scale and crack sealing. Just we spoke of earlier, that you want to address roads early on before they deteriorate. Very first thing you want to do is those roads that are 7, 8, 10 years old that are beginning to show some cracks. You want to seal those cracks, prevent water from getting in. Very short money. Pennies on the dollar, pennies on $10 to do that, but you extend the life by an additional 5 to 7 years. So we're going to do some crack sealing this year. We're going to be doing the final phase of reconstruction for, older water work, early phase roadway work, and then a final roadway work on Governors, Cary, Brush Hill, Walcott, Williams, and Atherton. The intermediate phase work, which is some restoration and some sidewalk and drainage work, going to be occurring on Bradley and Churchill's. And then the initial phase of construction will be the work that's resulting in that water work area, Central, Spafford, Hoy, Murray, and a piece of Pleasant down in that Murray and Hoy neighborhood, which is in the area between Edwards and Gordon, heading up the hill, heading up towards Edge Hill, but not quite all the way. Actually, to the intersection of Hoy and McKinnon, Murray and McKinnon. We're also in the midst of working on the Mass Works grant. That's that $1 million grant we have up on Elliott Street for streetscape improvements. That ties into our High Street project, which is literally right off of Elliott. And what it does is connects that Central Business District project from several years ago to the much earlier Adam Street rehabilitation project. It now connects the two together. It's using state Mass Works money to do that. Time is very, very swift on that one because that money sunsets next June, yet Mass DOT is stumbling on getting us a contract, so.
You going to start the work by June, or you have to have it finished by June?
Well, theoretically, it has to be complete by next June. Because they've had problems getting out of the starting gate, Mass DOT, we have some assurance that they're going to let it go through the end of next construction season and allow us to complete the work through the end of, let's say November or December of next year. But that one's pretty aggressive. We're ready to go. We've been ready to go since April, and we couldn't stop before July 1, and quite frankly, there's been some changes in the Mass DOT office, personnel changes that have resulted in one person doing 3 persons' work, and they just haven't gotten the contract to us yet. Our stormwater management efforts, we sweep streets, continuous sweep streets every day. It's not raining, and even some days it is raining. We do catch basin cleaning every single day. A pipeline installation area in High Street, which has been a drainage area that has no drainage in it on that steep hill, so we're installing a pipeline and collection system there this summer as part of that other project I just spoke of. We're going to continue to comply with our NIPD's Phase 2 permit. We're actually in the 11th year of a 5-year permit, so they're on a 6-year extension at the DEP. We understand that the final draft of the new permit is due out this fall. So when that comes out, we'll be drafting our notice of intent and submitting that, so we have our next 11-year, 5-year permit in place. We just completed the 604B study. That's a 604B grant program. We studied the various BMPs for stormwater improvements, water quality improvements. Based on the platform of that, it gave us target areas that we could do some things in certain neighborhoods. And with that confidence, we applied for a 319 grant, which is to actually carry out one of those. And one of those areas was Wendell Park, on either side of Wendell Park, to collect street drainage, treat it before it gets into the brook. that grant application's pending, we should know in October. Put a real rock-solid application together. We've actually
one with the
applied,
tree,
we've applied for tree filter boxes, like we've done before. We've done 4 other 319 grants, and we've gotten them all, applications. So we partnered up with NEPA on that, and if it wasn't for that partnering, I don't think we would fare as well as we have. Solid waste, continue looking at maintaining a quality assurance. That's a careful balance between making certain that the contractor is doing what he's supposed to be doing, but on the same token, the customer is doing what they're supposed to be doing. Are their trash stops compliant? Are they putting their stickers out? Are they putting enough stickers out for the amount of trash they have? So there's a careful balance to make certain that we're providing the service and Waste Management is doing that at the same time that the people are doing what they're supposed to do. That's a challenge that goes on every single day and will continue. We continue to look at tracking the tonnage and the trends of our tonnage, particularly in light of the fact that we see our revenues drop, and we want to compare it against revenues. We're seeing our revenues drop, sticker revenues, but we don't see a commensurate drop in tonnage, so we want to get a feel if that's going to become an escalating problem or not. On the same token, we see an increase in our recycling tonnage, but the recycling commodity market being so weak, we used to make money on our recycling as a revenue income, and we find that softening in some months to be 0, and historically was floating between $10,000 and $12,000 a month. So we're going to track that pretty carefully, because it's important to know, because we are now in the second year of a 2-year extension on Waste Management's contract. If you recall, Waste Management had a 5-year solid waste contract. And last year, I asked the Board of Selectmen, and the chairman agreed, and the board agreed, to convene a solid waste advisory committee to look at what we would do. Do we want to rebid it? Do we want to negotiate with Waste Management? Do we want to negotiate with another vendor? Trash, you don't have to bid. Solid waste, you can negotiate. It was decided to open up the conversation with Waste Management, look at what they had to offer on a short couple-year window extension. We walked away with what we thought to be a very good negotiating session, and a very good advantageous contract for us that was saving us money than what we had been paying in the 5th year. So we were saving money in year 6 and year 7. However, we're at times of the essence that we have now in the last year. We just started the last year of that extension, so I'm going to be asking the board again to reconvene the Solid Waste Committee for the purposes of doing the exact same thing. But at this time, we should not only look at the Waste Management extension, we have now completed through a local service grant with DEP, what we might consider for some other recycling initiatives and what options we might have. So I think the Solid Waste Advisory Committee is going to look at the extension, or the same question of whether we go to bid or whatever, and at the same time look at whether we want to take on additional recycling. Household Hazardous Waste Day, still scheduled. We do it, since I've came here in 2009, we've done it each year, and I'm pleased to announce we're going to do it again this September. We do it once per year, September 21st, for those listening at home. It's on your calendar that was mailed to you. It's on our website. It's on the town's website, so it's on our Facebook page. So I think everybody's had an opportunity to know it's Saturday, September 21st. Central maintenance, which is what we call our garage. It's a service garage. We maintain all of the equipment for all of the town, other departments, for the most part. Cemetery kind of handles their own, and school departments sometimes handles most of their own. But what I'm looking to do this year is establish controls for authorization for out-of-department repairs and expenses that occur on a just looking to establish controls for authorization for out-of-department repairs, because in many instances, there are other departments have either repairs or damaged equipment that they send out and get fixed on their own, and nonetheless, it affects my department directly, where, surprise, surprise, we get a $4,000, $5,000 bill. So I think I need to, particularly now that we're probably 4 years into the last override with level-funded budgets, we're feeling the pressures on the central maintenance side. We're also going to look at fleet creep concerns, where other departments have increased their fleet size, meaning if they had 10 vehicles, well, now they've got 12, but my budget didn't go up, but yet I'm maintaining 2 additional vehicles on a recurring basis. So, I got to look at fleet creep and really understand and have a plan in place of what we're looking at as we go into future budgets of, things that are out of my control, what other departments do with their vehicles. The fuel system, we're also going to look at creating an enterprise or revolving account that you will. Right now, the way fuel works is we provide through the other departments. We have an inventory control system that DPW paid $20,000 to put in place, yet that value of that equipment isn't reflected in the fuel costs. So I'm looking at taking what's the total cost of providing fuel to all the departments and build it into a per gallon cost, just like the gas station does. It's more than simply my wholesale cost of gas, which is all we pass on. So I'm going to look at that and try to get a handle on that. The engineering department, all of those projects I spoke of earlier, in one way or another, the engineering department's involved in. Absolutely when it's construction-based, absolutely when it's study-based or grant-based. They also maintain on a regular basis, daily basis, the GIS system, which actually is very much tied to other departments, particularly the assessor's office and the building and planning department. Our work order tracking, we issue permits, we're going to continue to do that. We're going to actually integrate our permit system into Joe Prondek's permit system to unify systems. We're going to be reviewing regulations, because if we've got opportunity to be looking at water and sewer regulations, maybe from a rate perspective, there might be some other things that they're changing as well. We should do them as all at once. We have the retroreflectivity grant, which is going to be creating another database within our GIS. I shouldn't say grant, that's actually a capital expenditure approved. We've dam safety improvement, which capital plan also approved, which we're going to be putting a contract out for, some dam safety work, which will be designed and bid probably through the winter, and construction starting sometime. I'd like to say spring, but you don't want to work on dams in spring. You typically want to work on them in the summertime. So the chances are that's going to happen next summer. And the East Milton Square Engineering RFP is hanging out before us in the engineering department. So that's what we're doing. And this quarter and probably every quarter thereafter, it's going to be maybe different street names, but it's the same thing year after year. And through a few snowstorms, tornadoes, and blizzards and floods thrown in.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. That was very informative. And we look forward to your next one.
I hope that's what format you were looking for. I took it for granted that maybe it is. If it isn't, let me know. I'll improve upon it the next time I come back.
That's great.
Thank you, Joe. Very thorough.
Very good.
Thank you for looking into the 88 Wharf.
Oh, you're welcome. Well,
matter.
we have a long way to go still, but we intend to do that. Very good. I think that was the last item I had, right?
We're just going to skip over number 16 for the time being, just to get to number 17, because Will Adamczyk is here. He's been here all night.
Okay.
Get him out of here.
We might want to even, up to you, defer 16, I mean, based
Chief
on...
is here.
Yeah. Will we get traffic? Well, yeah. I mean, it is getting late, that's all. And we still have an executive session to go through.
Right. So we have some motions here from the Traffic Commission.
Okay. I'll propose a motion to...
Does the
Chief,
Chief, you want to come up, please? For the traffic.
Happy birthday.
Who told you that?
I have my sources.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
What are we doing first? Traffic Commission?
Traffic Commission, yeah.
Can I invite Mr. Lynch up? Is that all right with you?
Sure.
Sure.
Yes, he's here. He's,
The library director's here as well.
And we can bring, Adam, you want to come up as well?
And Mr. Boylan is a trustee of the library as
Sure.
well.
And,
Let Bill have that one.
Dean Boylan.
Well, Jean, you come on up as well. Are you okay?
he just gets the job, and the biggest issue he has is how to get in and out of the building. So we have some recommendations, some Traffic Commission recommendations before you tonight. One of them, which, do they have copies of this?
No, I brought them in case there were questions.
And this predates, this has been an issue we've been dealing with almost 2 years. And it deals with the entrance and exit of
The smaller scale, same thing.
the new library, the main library. And it actually predates even me being chief. But it became clear to us over the past 2 years that there was a high frequency of accidents, and the majority of them all involved going in and out of the building, going in and out of the parking lot. They weren't happening in the parking lot, they weren't happening on the Reedsdale roadside, they were all happening on the Canton Avenue entrance. So we had Lieutenant Cherry and John Thompson work with the trustees for some time to try and come up with a solution. So to keep it short and to kind of bring it all into a nutshell, why you are where you are, is that when they built the library, there was a strong intention to save the tree at the beech tree there at the entrance. And so instead of, when you're in the parking lot, being able to go 360 rounds around trying to find a parking space, you have to go in, and if you had to go back, you'd have to go out and go back in again. So we've come up with a plan, John engineered it, that flip-flops the entrance and exit. It also addresses, and I know, if I believe, Mr. Hood, this goes back to when this first came before the board. I know you had concerns about the next thing, which was putting the parking in. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not an engineer, so I have my own, I'm in that boat with you. I have my own concerns, like, will this really work? And especially the part of it where it addressed bringing the parking like right down to the front of the library. And I'll let Joe talk a little bit about that, how they came up with that, engineered that, and why they think that'll be beneficial for us. It is.
I think the only, and I don't think it would make much difference, but the only thing I would ask is maybe that we have no parking there in the morning hours, until after 9 o'clock, and allow that to be a...
We didn't even get into the time restriction question. I think it's certainly...
Because the
fair
worst
game.
part is the morning. If there's going to be a backup...
Okay, they don't open till 11. That question was exactly brought up.
Okay.
They don't open till 11.
9.
Is this
Yeah.
street parking?
Yeah,
Yes,
street parking
yes.
right here.
Yeah, on the
And
street right
people,
here, the
even though
shaded
it's
area,
hard to
the
get
lines.
through, people use this lane to make a right-hand turn onto Reedsdale. And traffic is already pretty backed up
It
there.
moves
in
it
the
right
morning.
along, yeah.
And the library, because the library's not open till 9, we don't expect any library parking there until after the rush hour's over.
Right, so if we could just restrict parking in the morning hours, I think I wouldn't be certainly as opposed to it.
Well, from the engineering perspective, and you can tell me where I go wrong here, the way that the reason that they designed it this way and put the parking there was to try and keep it as tell me where I go wrong, as a single lane coming down
Yeah,
and then force you to queue over if you're gonna go towards East Milton Square and take the right. And as I say, I'm not 100, but I know how much work they did on this, and this is the solution they came up with. I will tell you that my belief was, from the first time I met with the trustees almost a year ago, and actually Lieutenant Cherry doing the research when they built this building, it called for this to be flip-flopped. It just doesn't seem normal. It just, when you look at it, we think coming from driving in America, when you drive from the right, the entrance is the first, you get to the entrance first.
Right.
This is, you go by the exit, then you go in the entrance, and it just doesn't seem correct. And I will say to you, we've been told that the tree is in very fragile, is that a good word?
It's a copper beech, and it's a beautiful specimen, and I think everybody's heart was in the right place to try to save it, but it's on its last leg. It's severely stressed, and it's actually got a lot of dead limbs on it, and actually probably 1/5 of the bark is peeling off of its perimeter. So I think there was just too much root damage when this was built, and the tree, though they tried to save it, isn't going to survive. So I think it's gonna theoretically open up a future opportunity when the tree does come down, that
To change
you
this
can
again.
provide they can provide some on-site circulation to allow their customers to navigate the parking lot better.
And to go back to your concern, a lot of times when we do come to make a change, we recommend a temporary change too, but this is just such a significant thing involving striping, and I wouldn't make that recommendation, but I will say to you, they really put a lot of time and effort into this to come up with this proposal, and the belief is, particularly the engineering belief from the town side, that this will alleviate a lot of the accidents that we're having there.
So in the more specific sense, is we had the same concern, and actually, Chief, it was 2 years ago.
Right, it's been a while.
It's been 2 years ago, and we rolled out this earlier prototype to the Board of Selectmen prior, a year ago, just as a heads up.
Right.
I think, Dennis, you saw it before? You've seen
Yep.
this before? Not to this level of detail, but it really, the intent hasn't changed any, and I know that Tom has. Katie, you're seeing this for the first time, perhaps. But we needed to have some sort of a basis of whether it made any sense before we could ask the trustees, because it couldn't be one or the other. They had to be done together, and we needed the trustees to gather as much support as they could in order for them to make their decision of changing the parking lot around. So in doing that, we also were concerned with the traffic, backing up and queuing up. But what we were finding is that the vast majority of the time, eastbound, if you will, on Canton Ave, heading from the police station towards Library Corner, vast majority of the time, there are in fact only one lane being used until you get down by the traffic signals, and it does back up 2 lanes up in the vicinity of the driveway area, and that's actually where the danger is. But the approach area, for the most part, they're using it as single lane. But more than the physical observation of what we thought was the case, we put out traffic counting tubes, and you can arrange those in such a way, and we did, in varying, staggering ways to be able to measure and quantify, how many people are cheating to the right, forming a second lane, where is that happening, and we progressively moved that about. And we found that the problem, when they actually start forming that second lane, for the most part.
It depends.
Other than that morning peak.
In the morning, yeah.
Other than
I'm
that
talking
morning peak.
strictly morning. It's 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. It's really narrow there, so it depends how the car on the left, how far over it is. Sometimes if you tuck your mirrors in, you can squeeze by and people will do it, and it queues up quite a bit if the cars are far enough over to the
What
left.
this doesn't show clearly is only because it's a relatively small scale. This also accounts for shifting that yellow center line, red, white, and blue, if you will, center line closer to Town Hall. So it's actually going to shift the lane over a little bit as well to give more.
Gives more room on the
more
eastbound side than the
eastbound travel.
westbound side.
Okay.
Without it taking some from westbound, but westbound has plenty of room in it.
Yep.
So it does prevent that crowding issue.
Now, in terms of, do we have some data on when most of the traffic accidents have happened there? Is it morning, afternoon?
No, most of them are in
No,
the afternoon.
mostly
In
afternoon.
the afternoon.
It's in
Afternoon rush.
between, yeah, it's anecdotally I've only been there 6 months, but most of the ones that I've experienced have been between the rush hours, often when the school gets out.
It scares me when someone who's been there 6 months says most of the ones I've witnessed.
Yeah, most of the ones.
Yeah.
And I think anyone who uses the library, and all you have to do is, you don't even have to, you notice that he's exactly right, it's after school gets out, it peaks there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It really,
and that's when it happens.
and that's when you've got, mothers and fathers and parents and students all trying to use it, and that's where we think that this will grant the most relief. I, again, going back to, in my thought, and I'm not saying this now, because we did vote this, we all did agree on this in the end, is that if it doesn't work, I would have no problem. The spaces that go between the entrance and
Those last 7 spaces.
go up to this driveway here, I would have no problem with removing those. I think the ones that go from the town hall driveway back towards the police station, I really don't think those will be an issue. If you look at like some of the concerts or some of the events you've had here at town hall, people park there anyway, and our traffic officers allow it, and it seems to work. All we're gonna do now is legalize it and regulate it.
And again, my only suggestion for those spaces, leave the spaces, but just in the morning, for the morning commute, just have no parking.
And just to be clear, this is only striping, no hardscape whatsoever.
Right.
There's a balloon in the middle of that page, if you see it, and it's a detail of a crosswalk area. That just simply shows that a crosswalk could be done in the future. There's clearly no funding for it, it would need to be signalized, but, it shows that it can fit within there. It could get people from those parking spaces across to the church, across to the gazebo, to town hall. Or just the opposite, those people who want to take those little field trips and go over to the powerhouse.
Yep.
You can do that as well.
Tom, you're saying no parking before 9?
Yeah.
I'm actually writing this for you right now.
I think that makes sense.
So that would.
That's fine, we don't have any use for it.
That would amend this recommendation to give you the recommendation as shown in number 3, Canton Avenue, but would include the language that on Canton Avenue, from the library entrance back to the first town hall entrance, there'd be no parking from 7 AM to 9 AM?
Yeah.
Why don't we say Monday through Friday, because
Monday
church
through-
does use it.
perfect.
We'll leave it on
Yep,
the 7th.
that's perfect.
All right with you?
Monday through Friday, 7 to 9.
Yeah, that's perfect.
That's fine with the library. And I will say the Board of Trustees is really grateful to the Traffic Commission, all the work they've done over the past couple of years, especially Officers Cherry and Mr. Thompson, who've come to multiple meetings. And the board did meet in May and voted unanimously to support this plan. And they also took the motion to reverse the direction of the parking lot as part of the plan.
And again, going back to, not that I'm, I think we had an issue with a tree before, not that I'm looking to go near a tree issue. If something does happen, if the tree comes out of play in this, I think that even though we don't have really jurisdiction on parking lots, we've told them we would help them to try and facilitate some on-site relief, because I think it would make, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's tough to be popular, and
Yeah.
they're a very popular facility in town, and we're trying to help them out here.
It's a good problem to have, so.
So,
I mean,
so
I'd be
if I
happy
can
to
make
make
that
a...
in form of a motion to
I'd be
you then?
happy to make that in form of a motion.
Oh, you want to do that? Okay.
To recommend that the board accept the Traffic Commission's recommendation to implement striping changes as shown on DPW conceptual plan dated 1/11/2013, and to accept the switching of the entrance to the Milton Public Library as shown on the plan, and in addition to restrict parking on the spaces on the eastbound side of Canton Ave from the first entrance of the
From the entrance of the library to the first entrance of Town Hall.
From 7 to 9 a.m.
Monday through Friday.
Monday through Friday.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And hopefully we don't have to come back and find.
Hopefully this one works, yeah.
But thank you for that. And we understand that we could see the frustration on the sense of the trustees that again, they're a very popular site and they're trying to find a way for us and you to give them some type of relief.
The thing is, if it doesn't work, you have to come back.
Right, we would have to come back, but
Safety is paramount in this. We don't want to see any more accidents.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully they're moving in the right direction, so, thank you.
Two other recommendations.
Yeah, I'll go
Staying
up-
so late.
Thanks, Will.
I'll jump back to number one. We have a recommendation to you on Audubon Road, which would install a stop sign on Audubon Road at the intersection of Warren Avenue. And I'll do number two as well, because it's becomes four. It would also include Dyer Avenue, a stop sign on Dyer Avenue at the intersection of Warren Avenue.
So no stop sign on Warren, just on Dyer, and
Yes.
just on Audubon, coming into?
Yes.
Okay. I think that makes sense.
I drove it today. It does make sense.
Okay, I'll make a motion to install a stop sign on Audubon Road at the intersection of Warren Ave.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
And I'll make a further motion to install a stop sign on Dyer Ave at the intersection of Warren Ave.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Number four is a recommendation to you. It was actually one that we voted on to present to the selectmen to ask to put on last year's town meeting. We just didn't get here in time. We'd ask if you would submit the article which we've submitted to Anne Marie for inclusion for the special town meeting, actually the October town meeting of this year. And this involves establishing a revolving fund for the purchase of maintenance of traffic signs, signals, and control devices under the jurisdiction of the Traffic Commission. One of the things, as you know, is the Traffic Commission is a zero budget. The research and the engineering, the background stuff comes out of us, the safety stuff, the engineering comes out of Joe's budget. I think this is for $5,000. This is to take $5,000 out of the
This
fees.
is great, sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to what's the source of the revenue?
The
They-
police budget.
Police department, no, the police department sells service zone
The
parking.
service zone parking.
Service zone parking.
So it takes some of that
Right.
revenue
And what it really does is, every action we take as far as installing a sign, basically, it's $150 a pop every single time, and that's assuming there's only one sign.
Yep.
So when we do parking regulations, and we're literally putting in 15 signs, you know, literally just, tapping the Public Works Department.
So you're looking for a
It's been challenge.
$5,000 revolving fund?
Create a revolving fund that funds it through revenues generated from parking. That seems to make sense.
Because if you've noticed a trend, that almost every time we have a traffic commission, some of the recommendation involves installation or change of sign. So this was Joe's idea, and so we
Yeah,
decided
right.
to
It does
make
make
this
sense.
recommendation. We'll give us some money each year to try and find the funds to pay for some of these signs, other than putting it all in his budget.
Yeah, makes sense.
Maybe I'll take it out of my gas account, I don't know. I had to get that in.
What do you think next on Bill?
Well, it's just going to be a town meeting article, so.
It's going to be included in the list you get at your next
So we'll
meeting.
vote on it when we get it as an article.
Yeah, I think it would be your articles.
The language has already been submitted.
Yes.
What we're reporting out is the Traffic Commission unanimously voted to recommend it, and we're asking the selectmen, when the warrant comes to you, to do the same.
Okay.
Chief, while you're here, is the Traffic Commission looking at the traffic on Adams Street coming from Quincy towards the square? You can no longer make a right turn onto Granite. I had somebody call me about that recently, that the traffic is backing up quite a bit on Adams because there's no longer a right turn allowed.
I'm taking a few, because they want did you get a request to put the right turn back on? So they want to be able to turn right at Granite Avenue on Adams again. And we've had a lot of discussion about this ourselves, and we do think.
Right on Red.
Right on Red, I mean.
Yeah.
We do think that once you make the permanent changes in the square, it's going to alleviate this. But for right now, I don't think we thought there was a safe way to do this.
I don't mean to correct you.
You can correct
As
me.
it was, prior to the July 1st threshold, when we physically built those islands and sealed it off, we couldn't allow that right in turn because the vast majority of the pedestrians, the only way across was there. It was creating a hazard. People turning right with the pedestrians. What we've done now, we've created those islands, we've now given wayward routes to get everybody to the central island, and we've actually put some pedestrian signals in. So that other crosswalk, which is over by the dry cleaner at the corner, that crosswalk can go away. And in fact, when we're striping, which we started last week and we should be completing, hopefully the weather holds out by the end of this week, that crosswalk can go away, and we're going to do a lane shift as we approach into that intersection. So I believe we ought to be looking at, in the next traffic commission, is reinstituting the right-hand turn. Okay? But we can't simply put it up until the commission does it and you people allow for that, because right now it does not exist. That right-hand turn is not allowed.
As you know, we had a sign, we took one of the department digital signs, and we had it there for temporarily, or wound up being there for months, and we had to get it out of there to make the changes that you're making now. But the first person who brought that to our attention, the danger, as Joe talks about, was the crossing guard for St. Agatha's, who really had concerns with allowing that right turn the way it is now. Someone's going to get killed. So if you want, I'll reach out, but if maybe just ask them to be a little patient, that there are changes coming, and that will be gone.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things we're going to be able to do is actually, by allowing the right-hand turn, we're actually going to be able to add 5, 6, 10 seconds back into that circuit, which is going to free up traffic through that.
Granite Ave.
Both on Granite Ave and on Adams Street coming from Quincy. It's going to do both.
Well, the right on Red should just calm that anyways, but.
And it is designed, and this goes back to when Kevin was chief, the way it's laid out to give preference to Adams, not Granite.
Yes.
So if you're coming, especially in the morning, and you're traveling through the square, Adams Street, and it's only seconds, but it's more seconds than Granite Ave gets in seconds. It gives the preference to Adams, going Adams to Granite versus coming Granite up from Quincy that way there. Right. Which is why you see the queues a lot, especially in the early morning rush hour.
It is frustrating when you're on Granite to see the light go green, see it go red, and you haven't moved.
Which explains
2 or
the
3
whole
light
down the
cycles.
road up to, that's where that all comes from. The only last thing that we have is, and this came from Mr. Yoder, we met with a resident of Lodge Street. We put it on, it was the last minute we put it on, we discussed it. He represented the residents. He's just going to go back and feed to them what we discussed. One of the difficulties we have placing any other restriction on Lodge Street is it's already restricted, right? And then if we recommend anything else, it's how are you going to get home? So what we've explained to them that we will do is John is gonna do some accurate counts once we get back into September, see what the true numbers are on the Pleasant Street to Randolph Ave cut through, where are they going, how are they, and then maybe try to figure out a resolution, but we didn't wanna do anything just, so, and we explained that to them, that for every action, there's a reaction. In theory, it seems simple, okay, the cars are coming off of Pleasant, they're trying to beat the light at Reensdale and Randolph, let's put a restriction there, well, you've already got a restriction on the other end, you just, we have to allow people a way to get home. So we are dealing with that, and we will go visit that again in the fall.
Thank you. Stay right there, Chief, because we have a discussion
How much are they paying
on...
you for this job?
What?
How much are they paying you for this job? Because your hours tonight are...
This is overtime now, yeah. Once 10 o'clock hits.
Yeah, double time.
Thank you, Joe.
Harbor Master Guidelines, can you bring us up to date?
So, in a nutshell, I created this, and I'm just going to be very brief. I created this based on a piece of equipment that we received from law enforcement grant to law enforcement. It's a DOJ initiative that we've been partnered in for 28 years. I'm sure you've all heard, and I'm not trying to, there are many ancillary roles that go with being chief, from animal control to school resource officer, attendance, investigate, just so many different ones, auxiliary police, emergency management. I presented an SOP based on a statutory change, based on what I see as an ancillary need, and I don't think I can describe it any easier than what happened Saturday. For those of you who don't know, we took a 911 call for a body in the water off the Neponset River, the Ponce Valley Yacht Club. I have not put that boat in the water pending your approval of the SOP that I put before you, so it's been sitting in the police station ever since. I don't want to see that happen again. What happened for the last 2 years, where it sat for 220 days and wound up with 50 gallons of water in the gas tank, and it was completely inoperable. I don't want to see that happen again. And with the help of Joe's guys in our own offices, they got it back running again. But to respond to that call, Lieutenant West put his own boat in the water and went out to retrieve that body. I mean, we handle major things here, we handle little things here. And this is a little thing, but this is something where part of the reason why, as an ancillary piece of equipment, we should have it. I did believe, and this is why I presented to you in a way that you do have a harbor master, you do have concerns there. There are things that he should be able to do as well, and that's why I wrote it in the way. I didn't make any changes to it. It's before you. You see, people expect us to, when things happen, to respond to them, and all I am trying to do here is to try and add one piece of equipment that can assist us when the citizens need it. And I will say to you, it's funny that in the 6 years I've been chief, it's amazing the things that wind up on our desk, including some of the most recent incidents in the past couple of weeks, just unbelievable. But so, as I say, that's why I wrote it the way I did.
You had some concerns about it?
Well, I think the way it's written now, it does give, in an emergency incident, it's just a phone call to Anne Marie, saying we have an emergency, we need it. I guess we could even say if it's an actual life and death emergency, you just take it and get the approval afterwards. But in a planned event, we just actually no. In an emergency event, you just have the right to use it, right?
No. Actually,
emergency incident in the water, Milton Fire, using equipment may commandeer the boat, respond to the emergency. In an emergency incident, you have the right to just use it. That would have been an emergency, and then just inform the Board of Selectmen of the actions as soon as possible. So use it first, tell us afterwards.
And the same thing would apply to the fire department.
Yes. In a planned event, just get the approval beforehand.
Yeah, I think the confusion, the reason this was an issue at the last meeting, I was surprised to see a standard operating procedure for a Marine unit, because we hadn't had any discussion before about a Marine unit. What we did in June was transfer the boat it was sitting at the fire department because they didn't need it, and it had been sitting there, as you said, for a couple of years. We transferred it to the harbor master the standard operating procedure that, and I think, I hadn't even recalled, I had to ask Anne Marie to refresh my memory on this, that we had talked about doing guidelines for it. I just remember we took the vote to transfer it to the harbor master for the harbor, we had a new harbor master for the harbor master's use. But I think maybe it was Tom, you who had suggested that we get some guidelines in place since it's a new harbor master who were just appointed. We're transferring this boat to the harbor master. What we have is an SOP that would give the boat, it refers to the police department boat that the harbor master would have access to or use of. The vote was actually to transfer to the harbor master. And I think we were just looking for guidelines, or maybe you or Tom, for guidelines on how, you know, the harbor master's a volunteer. He's not a town employee. I don't think he even lives in town. He lives in Quincy, and he's a member of the yacht club.
Does he operate under the police department?
No, he operates at the appointment of this board. No, the harbor master, as I understand it, has never really been in to report periodically
not at all.
to the board.
In any way, shape, or form.
No,
Yeah.
never has, I don't think.
Which, as I outlined in the SOP, in the changes in the law in 2008, there were reasons why obviously the legislature made those changes, and why nearly almost every police department in the eastern Massachusetts has adopted something of it. And as I say, I'm not looking to make a mountain out of a molehill, and I would have to say, I'm not so sure you want to take a $30,000 piece of town equipment that was granted to the police department by the federal government in a law enforcement grant and give it to a non-paid employee who really has no guidelines. I mean, it's the same, as I said, we talked about the auxiliary police, the auxiliary fire. They come under fire under the fire chief, police under the police chief. I view the harbor master no different than that. It is ancillary, almost like the animal control officers, but the animal control officer is a full-time paid position. I'm not, but I just...
The harbor master historically has never had police duties, right?
True, and they never had, not in this town, they never had police authority. They've never had anything. They've just kind of existed. And it's been a member of the yacht club, which in that in itself, to me, for me as police chief, to you is, I'm not even sure you'd want to have that. I think you want to have an independent person who has no tie to any yacht club, you know, just who's looking out for your interests, the interests of the
And
town.
we certainly don't want to create a paid position.
I'm not looking for that either. I mean, this is, but and I say this with no disrespect, in the reality of it, when there's an emergency, we deal with some critical things here. You know, the thought that we're going, I mean, the chief runs your day-to-day operations. He's going to make a phone call to get permission to do this. I just
You
find
don't
that
have to.
unreasonable.
Under these guidelines, if it's an emergency, you use it first, and then, I believe, because we are, I mean, what I have here is the rewritten guidelines, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
You
So
have
in
both
the-
sets. You have the rewritten guidelines.
Yeah,
and then
so
you
that's
have
what
the
I'm looking
standard
right now.
operating
In the event of an
procedure.
emergency incident on the water, the Milton Police Department and the Milton Fire Department, using qualified and trained personnel, may commandeer the harbor master boat to respond to the emergency incident, period. The Milton Board of Selectmen shall be informed of such actions as soon as possible, which means after the incident, not before. So the only time you would need permission would be in the case of a planned event, fireworks, you know, something you know is going to happen. Just run it by us and, you know, we need to use the boat for it. But, I mean, that's...
Yeah, whereas the SOP would assign a supervisor to the harbor master.
And basically, it's correct, because what I've done there is, as I said in the last meeting, there's no entity of the police department that doesn't report to someone in the police department, if you're going to have police authority.
And we've taken all police authority. I don't think there's anything in here that's police.
You don't have any, if you've made him the harbor master, in essence, he has to meet the requirements of the statute to be your harbor master, the training statute.
Yes,
And this
Mr.
is what I
Train,
said to
yes.
him. In essence, you're making him a special police officer. So either, that's the only reason, as you can see in the way I wrote it, it places him the same as auxiliary police or anyone else, where someone in the police department oversees it. I mean, think about the rationale that we're taking a non-paid volunteer and just not have him, with that type of authority, not have him answer to anyone. I just assume withdraw the whole thing. And
Well, he answers to the harbor master answers to the board, and I do think we need to have the harbor master report at least maybe once or
Quarterly?
twice a year. I mean, a written report annually, but maybe a more frequent report to the board.
Right,
But
and I guess it's
is
more.
he a special police officer, or does the harbor master just have certain police?
Yeah, you're gonna give him police
I believe-
authority, you're gonna
I
give him police
believe-
authority on the water, you are gonna give him that. You're gonna give him the authority to,
I don't know that we
The
have
police-
to, though,
I
necessarily.
believe town council looked into that question.
I don't know how you
It says on the
know.
harbor master position, whether or not he is.
required to be a special police officer, you certainly could be appointed.
No, he's required, well, that comes under the statute of, under 2008, the acts of whatever it is, I don't have it in front of me right now, where it mandates the 250 hours training, and that's where as he completes that, he gets the authority that goes with it. It's clear to me that you feel you want him to be a separate entity with, and the last thing I will say to you is that if that's your wish, that's fine.
Yeah, we don't want to restrict both in case of an emergency. We certainly can understand the need for that, so, I mean, that's.
But on the other hand, I don't think you want to take this, and this is my point, put it somewhere where all of a sudden you have a day, and these days don't happen often, but this is the third body in 2 years we're pulled out of there. You've got 10 crew boats down there used by kids in this town every single year now. I'm not saying that this is something that we're going to put money to, put staff to. We have qualified people that can operate it now, but when something happens, it should be function and ability to run in an emergency. And I believe that was the purpose that I saw it on. That was the reason I wrote the SOP in the way it is, not to make a mountain out of a molehill.
Mhm.
But I think putting that type of responsibility for that type of piece of equipment on an unpaid volunteer, who I agree wholeheartedly, and I believe was my suggestion, who said it to you, we should make this piece of equipment available to him. I never asked that, which, if you can do it if you want, but I never suggested that we just outright give it to an unpaid volunteer to have him responsible for it. When all of a sudden, a day like Saturday happens, we don't even know if it runs. We don't know, we don't. Why don't I do this? Let me take the two of them and try and pair what I have down to meet your needs, but to also meet the operational needs of the police department. Would that be something amenable to you?
I mean, I'll certainly take a look at it, sure. Katie, it's up.
Yeah, I think we were only looking to have some rules on, we want cooperation among the departments. We want the fire department, the police department, the harbor master all to have access to this boat when needed. The idea was to transfer it to the harbor master because it
He's
made
probably,
the
on a
most
day-to-day
sense that-
basis, he's probably going to have the most need for it.
No, the harbor master has a lot of other duties that aren't related to
I
police
agree,
work.
and listen, I
Yeah.
said to you the other day, I think that you should, especially in things such as the maintenance of that waterway, the moorings, the excise, the care and custody of that parking lot, which is yours, the discharge of anything out of all those boats, absolutely, I agree with you 110, not my responsibility, it should be his, and I think that type of direction has to come from you. I really do. I think those are the things that you have to make very clear to him. But as far as anything, as far as enforcement, money, responding to emergencies, I mean, and I'm not here to speak against another department, I'm not here to, but we've already seen what happened when we tried one way. I got it back to where it's now operational. All I'm saying to you is that I think that I can give you a way where we should have the responsibility for it. Think about, is there any department in town where we've given an unpaid volunteer a $30,000 or $40,000 piece of equipment and not be responsible to an operational department head? I don't think it exists anywhere.
Well, I mean, I think theoretically, or not theoretically, more than theoretically, he's responsible to the town administrator right now. And that's the way it typically has been. Now, there hasn't been a lot of reporting. There hasn't been probably much communication, I'm guessing. Now that he's got these additional police responsibilities, well, I don't even know if they're responsibilities.
He has statutory harbor master responsibilities. He really does, and I think you need to emphasize that. I really do, because I would say this to you, and Mr. Hurley and I have had this discussion several times. I'm like, you should take a ride. You want to get out and see the jewelry that you have, but I think you want to try and, I think if you were to talk to like Bill Clark, people who are involved, in, they will understand this and probably echo the same things I'm saying to you tonight.
The SOP seems to be creating a unit. And
I
I'm.
could change it from that, but I do think, I really do think.
What are you, Chief, what are you anticipating? We've got a harbor master, we've got a supervisor who's going to be responsible for the harbor master under this SOP, if we were to adopt this.
I still think he's going to have to do that.
What are you anticipating? Because to me, the needs for the police department are on the street. We're not Situate, we're not Cape Cod.
True, I agree. I'm not looking
Quincy,
to go there.
so we don't have a big need,
Day-to-day
I think, for a marine unit. So I think the question is, we've got a volunteer, a harbor master, who reports to the town administrator and to the board. We need to improve the reporting on that. What do you anticipate if this SOP were to be in effect? What would this unit look like? How would it work? How many people would be involved?
No more than someone who's qualified who has to go out in it, either for like a planned event like the fireworks or an emergency like Saturday. As far as him reporting to someone, I really think, and I would think that town council would agree with me on this, that if, as it's outlined in the statute, if we're going to mandate that he has to take a prescribed law enforcement course of training and annual in-service, just like we do with the auxiliaries, I think that lieutenant who oversees them should do the same thing. I mean, he's going to take CPR first. Those are the things that he's going to have to take. And I don't think, in talking to him, I don't think he realized this before, because you're correct. It just kind of exists. And I'm not looking for it to be anything more than something structured for when it does have to exist, whatever he's going to have to do. And as I've said to him, and I stated to you and I'll restate, is all I'm looking to do is to try and, A, make sure that someone takes responsibility for that. I'm willing to do that. That's always obtained. B, I'm willing to oversee the statutory, just the statutory requirements he has. Any equipment needs he has, I'll take care of that. Anything else that you want to put in place, I'm telling you, I support it 110%. And having him answer to you for this, I agree with that as well.
Well, the question I want answered first is, because he is a volunteer, we've had a volunteer harbor master there for years and years and years. What were his duties? Because I certainly don't want to increase the duties of this person beyond what the duties of the previous one was,
Yes.
where it is a volunteer position. So I don't want to do any more than what the other guy did. The other guys happen to have a boat, this guy doesn't. You need a boat.
Your
He was
former
his
harbor
own.
master had his own boat.
He was his own boat.
Smokey.
And you
Right.
put, one thing you put in there, I agree with, you should put. I think, just as he's the harbor master, and you point out the waterway, even though you're right, it's not the Cape, it's not Situate, but it is, I mean, we have the bike path there now, we have kayakers, there's 2 kayak ramps, it is used, I mean.
Oh, sure,
we've-
it's used.
And so, I think he's the person who needs to know. You put in there that he needs to put in markings. I agree with, there are none there. There are none there. So that's something that has to be done. It's not a big job, it's what the other gentleman did, but I think those are the things, I think you want those. But I do think too, I really do, you need the guidelines you're talking about in the year 2013, I think you need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the reason we're doing this, is to have some guidelines, but
Yes.
to define the job, more a job description than anything else, and also to give the police and fire department use of that boat in both emergency and non-emergency situations. And I think this does that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it serves, the draft that the town council and the town administrator had put together serves the purpose that we have for the harbor master. And certainly if the harbor master has a police function to carry out, it makes sense for him to be communicating with the police department, or in the case of an emergency, to have the harbor master and the officers who are involved working collaboratively.
I agree with you 100%. I don't, as I say, I see this ancillary, but I go back to when we have an incident like Saturday morning, it should be very clear. I mean, we live in the 911 world. When we get 911 calls, we know how to respond to them. That's really my concerned for it. That's my,
So Chief, under this, the town administrator told me a little bit about the incident on Saturday morning. It sounds like that probably would fit the category of an emergency incident where the police department could come in and just use the boat and tell the town administrator after the fact. I'm not sure why the draft that has been prepared, not the SOP, but the revised draft, why that wouldn't serve that purpose.
if you look at 100 SOPs, none of them are like that. And to be honest with you, and I don't say this disrespectfully, we respond to major things every day. And I think from a police department and from an operational point of view, we do a pretty good job of keeping you apprised of everything major that happens in this town. But there's nowhere in any SOP where it says, if this happens, you have to do it if you use this. It just, and either I'm the police chief or I'm not the police chief. So that's, it comes down to as simple as that. And and I know this is a small thing, but I just.
Would I be correct in saying, Tom and Katie, that you wanted to give the chief full use of the boat but get permission?
Not in an emergency.
In an emergency situation, don't even need
Not
permission.
except in an emergency, you can just
In
use
a
it.
non-emergency, if there's a planned event on the river that is a public safety type of thing, then yeah. Then
What about going down in the evening, jumping on the boat and patrolling up and down once or twice, just to let the public see that it's
I have
being
no,
involved?
I don't even have any interest in that.
No, no.
Yeah, I hear that, but that's not.
I mean,
I think it's a good idea to do that.
Well,
I wish
I
I
guess
could-
we should talk about that. I mean, it might be a good idea to do that.
But it takes
Have we
it
ever
takes a-
done it?
It takes a policeman off of something else. It takes a policeman off of a detail someplace and puts him on the water, even if it's for an hour.
I
And we
understand.
already don't have enough police.
But that waterway is part of Milton. It's part of our policing.
It is.
So you take them off the road, you put them on the water for an hour. It's the same thing. He's
It is,
policing
but-
the water for an hour, he's back on the road. It's the same thing. He's in Milton policing our waterways and roadways. Yet, to go on the water, we're requiring them to get permission. I don't think that's right. I think Anne Marie has enough to do, to be quite truthful.
Well,
in running this town.
I guess I haven't seen a need. I haven't seen a need for crimes that have been created on the water or to any degree, period, on the Neponset River. There may be some occasional thefts, but
we want to keep it that way.
But, cruising the river for an hour isn't going to stop a theft at 2 o'clock in the morning from a boat. We're not going to have somebody out there 24/7. So I don't see what purpose that serves. The boat's there, it will be at the harbor. If there's an emergency situation, it's there at a moment's notice.
Okay. And I appreciate that. In an ideal world, that would be, and I'm not going to lie, you hear the issues that we deal with, so I'm not, I do agree with you that if the situation presented that you could do that you wouldn't have to ask to do that, but it's not something I'm looking to do. But in the other, I'm really just looking to have it there available, but the other concern I have, I can live with all that.
Okay.
But the bigger concern I have is taking this piece of equipment, which we acquired through a law enforcement grant, and giving it the responsibility for it to an unpaid volunteer. That's what I have. I mean, I'm not going into details a lot, but I'm not happy about what we got back.
Is he?
It just.
Well, what you got back just sat in the at the fire station, wasn't used for. But I mean, this is going to be used on a regular basis. I assume he's a certified Coast Guard.
No, I don't think he's any of that yet. No, he's not. He's not any of that stuff.
He's been on the water for several years. He's not Coast Guard certified.
You're living in the ideal world. We're going back into Mr. Clay's guy.
I mean, I know so many people that are Coast Guard certified.
I'm not looking to make this a major.
My wife's Coast Guard certified, never been on a boat in her life. She went through the Coast Guard
You want to
course.
give her a job? She might do a good job. I don't, those are the only two things that I'm asking for, is A, I have no problem with, as I recommended to you in the beginning, making this totally available to him and him only, not members of the Milton Yacht Club.
Yep.
He and he alone.
That's absolutely right.
But
And-
two, that aspect, that the responsibility for the care, custody, and ownership of that boat come under us. And B, that the only aspects of the training part of it, as far as I'm answering to it, is for any training that he has to take. Because To get into those courses, I will have to sign off. The chief of police has to sign off for any officer from any rank of any, to go to any course. I sign off Mark Williams's, anyone, or Lieutenant, Lieutenant Alba now in my, as the training officer. That's, I'm just trying to give you the assurances that I'm not trying to usurp any of your authority, and I reiterate again, whatever guidelines you have as far as the care and custody of it, do it. And I'm not trying to, I agree with you too, I don't think you should try and make a ton of work from them, but I do think that if you would bring in like the Quincy, Boston, Weymouth, Braintree, Harvester, and listen to the things they would tell you that.
Oh, they'd probably do a
from
ton
this,
more
that-
things,
that
yeah.
you want to.
But they have serious waterways.
You've got 65 boats. One boat dumps 100 gallons of fuel in that river, you've got a big
Sure.
problem. And right now, there's nobody. And I'm not proposing that I wanted a Marine to do anything. I think that the harbor master has to do those things. I think, you know, you have to collect your excise tax. You have to, you do that. It's, I mean, it's not a lot of money, but you sit here every week and you see department head after department head coming to you looking for, I mean, one of the things that Nancy, God bless her, when she became animal control officer, she went out, I couldn't believe how many people just didn't have dog licenses. And she's been really good about that. And some people don't like it, but obviously the Board of Selectmen of the town of Milton created these bylaws and ordinances for a reason.
Yep.
So, those are the only two things that I'm concerned. If I go back and I'll just make those couple of changes, I'll send it back to you. And I don't even have to come back. If you could just, those two things for me, I would be happy with that.
But you're saying, Chief, one of them is to have the custody and control of the boat be with the police department rather than the harbor master.
He can have it, I want, as I said before, and as I've asked him, he hasn't done it yet, find a mooring, put that boat somewhere where it can be accessible, not just for him, but for emergency responders if we have to go out there. But I think the ultimate control, there's a reason why they gave it to us. I think the ultimate control for that type of piece of equipment at that expense, seeing what just happened to it already, I think that should fall under us. I really do.
Why don't we at our next meeting have the harbor master in, just to talk to him?
In the one thing, can we agree to one thing tonight, though? Can we at least put it in the water so that it's accessible there?
Absolutely. I don't have a problem with that.
Sure, yeah.
All right.
It's fully insured, Anne Marie,
Yeah, it's
right?
all
And
good.
Yes, it's
everything is-
registered,
it's
it's
registered.
insured.
We did, I mean, we've
More-
done all that, and,
Yep. Moor it out in the river, and that's fine.
okay.
Just, it stays in the river, that's all.
I thought you said earlier, Chief, that you were keeping it over there
Until you made a
until
decision.
we made a
to put it
decision,
on.
so
No
now
one's-
you're.
Because the only thing
Oh,
this board voted was to use it, was to approve the use of it for the fireworks, I think, and so
No,
No, we actually transferred it to the harbor master. I looked back at the vote. because-
Yes. The email that you sent over requested that they transfer it to the harbor master, but give the police department the use of it for the fireworks display.
for that night.
That's what they approved. But I thought you said tonight that it hasn't gone in the water yet because these weren't approved. So are you comfortable because these are not approved, having it go in the water?
I'm comfortable with that for now.
Okay, and we'll work on this in the meantime. That sounds fine.
Okay. I will tell you, there was a significant break today. The 200 block of Randolph Avenue, again, it's a rare entrance during the day. They smashed out a window. Our detectives are currently in the town of Sudbury right now. We believe what they did in this case was they took the victim's computer. The victim had no idea the house had been broken into. We got a call from she got a call from a computer store stating that someone was in the store trying to sell her computer to them. And the clerk, to his, he was able to override, it's amazing how easy he could buy a password. He got in it, and from whatever he saw in the content, led him to the true owner, and he made the call. Unfortunately, while he was making the call, they ditched it, ran out the door, but we were able to get them on video surveillance. And there's a couple other clues that they left behind that led us to a house. As I say, our detectives are in Sudbury right now, and I can't reemphasize enough that this is such a regional issue right now, and we really need to continue to be diligent about it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We are prime for our entire town, so.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night. Happy birthday. All right, number 18 is the approval of the Yacht Club launch date extension. We have a motion.
This is a retroactive approval, right?
Yes.
So I'll move that we approve the request for the Milton Yacht Club Executive Board to extend the launch dates beyond the required date of July 15th to July 21st to accommodate the need for additional maintenance on several boats and an 11-foot tide to launch.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Number 19, approval of boards and committees.
The first one I will be recused on because this is my
That's
sister,
true.
so I'll recuse myself.
I'll make a
on this one.
motion to approve and appointment of Maureen Conlon to the Council on Aging to serve through June 2016.
Second.
I'll make- Actually, you can come back now, Katie. Oh, I'm sorry.
Did you vote it?
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Okay. I will make a motion to approve the appointment of the following members to the Fair Housing Committee to serve through July 2014. Didn't we already do this?
We did the regional.
Did the regional.
Oh,
now
okay,
this
you're
is
right.
the town.
Thomas Callahan, Joseph A. Duffy Jr., Alexander Whiteside, and William Clark.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
And I propose a motion to discharge the members of the Consolidated Facilities Committee as the committee's charge has been completed.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? That's unanimous.
Yep.
I think I was on that committee.
Probably were.
Yes, you were.
So we need to vote it aye.
You were.
I was? Okay, good.
We didn't take the vote yet, so.
Oh.
We seconded it, but we didn't vote it.
Okay.
All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Then number 20, approval of a rosary rally.
I'll move that we approve a request from resident Patricia Clasby, 42 Antwerp Street, to conduct a public square rosary on Saturday, October 12th, from noon to 2 o'clock on the East Milton deck across from the firehouse.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Make a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate at Deer Run Lane, believing that having these discussions in open session would have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the body, and to return to open session to adjourn.
Second.
Second. Yeah, good.
Ms. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen, yes. We're in executive.